Welcome back to O'Clock in the Journal, where timeless stories come alive. Today we continue our journey into the world of Maurice Leblanc with The Hollow Needle, a thrilling tale of hidden treasures, cunning deceptions, and the unmatched intellect of Arsène Lupin. Let's begin. Chapter 7. The Treatise of the Needle. It is 4 o'clock in the morning. Isidore has not returned to the Lycée Janson. He has no intention of returning before the end of the war of extermination, which he has declared against Lupin. This much he swore to himself under his breath, while his friends drove off with him, all faint and bruised, in a cab. A mad oath, an absurd and illogical war. What can he do, a single, unarmed stripling, against that phenomenon of energy and strength? On which side is he to attack him? He is unassailable. Where to wound him? He is invulnerable. Where to get at him? He is inaccessible. 4 o'clock in the morning. Isidore has again accepted his schoolfellow's hospitality. Standing before the chimney in his bedroom, with his elbows flat on the mantel-shelf and his 2 fists under his chin, he stares at his image in the looking-glass. He is not crying now. He can shed no more tears, nor fling himself about on his bed, nor give way to despair, as he has been doing for the last 2 hours and more. He wants to think and understand, and he does not remove his eyes from those same eyes reflected in the glass, as though he hoped to double his powers of thought by contemplating his pensive image, as though he hoped to find at the back of that mirrored Beautrelet the unsolvable solution of what he does not find within himself. He stands thus until 6 o'clock, and little by little, the question presents itself to his mind with the strictness of an equation, bare and dry and cleared of all the details that complicate and obscure it. Yes, he has made a mistake. Yes, his reading of the document is all wrong. The word aiguille does not point to the castle on the Creuse. Also, the word demoiselle cannot be applied to Raymond de Saint-Véran and her cousin, because the text of the document dates back for centuries. Therefore, all must be done over again, from the beginning. How? One piece of evidence alone would be incontestable: the book published under Louis XIV. Now, of those 100 copies printed by the person who was presumed to be the man with the iron mask, only 2 escaped the flames. One was purloined by the captain of the guards and lost. The other was kept by Louis XIV, Welby's handed down to Louis XV, and burnt by Louis XVI. But a copy of the essential page, the page containing the solution of the problem, or at least a cryptographic solution, was conveyed to Marie Antoinette, who slipped it into the binding of her Book of Hours. What has become of this paper? Is it the one which Beautrelet has held in his hands, and which Lupin recovered from him through Brédoux, the magistrate's clerk? Or is it still in Marie Antoinette's Book of Hours? And the question resolves itself into this: what has become of the Queen's Book of Hours? After taking a short rest, Beautrelet consulted his friend's father, an old and experienced collector, who was often called upon officially to give an expert opinion, and who had quite lately been invited to advise the director of one of our museums on the drawing up of the catalogue. "Marie Antoinette's Book of Hours?" he exclaimed. "Why, the Queen left it to her waiting woman, with secret instructions to forward it to Count Fersen. After being piously preserved in the Count's family, it has been for the last 5 years in a glass case." "A glass case?" "In the Musée Carnavalet, quite simply." "When will the museum be open?" "At 20 minutes from now, as it is every morning." Isidore and his friend jumped out of a cab at the moment when the doors of Madame de Sévigné's old mansion were opening. "Hello, Monsieur Beautrelet!" A dozen voices greeted his arrival. To his great surprise, he recognized the whole crowd of reporters who were following up The Mystery of the Hollow Needle. And one of them exclaimed, "Funny, isn't it, that we should all have had the same idea? Take care, Arsène Lupin may be among us." They entered the museum together. The director was at once informed, placed himself entirely at their disposal, took them to the glass case and showed them a poor little volume, devoid of all ornament, which certainly had nothing royal about it. Nevertheless, they were overcome by a certain emotion at the sight of this object, which the Queen had touched in those tragic days, which her eyes, red with tears, had looked upon, and they dared not take it and hunt through it. It was as though they feared lest they should be guilty of a sacrilege. "Come, Monsieur Beautrelet, it's your business." He took the book with an anxious gesture. The description corresponded with that given by the author of the pamphlet. Outside was a parchment cover, dirty, stained, and worn in places, and under it the real binding in stiff leather. With what a thrill Beautrelet felt for the hidden pocket! Was it a fairy tale, or would he find a document written by Louis XVI and bequeathed by the Queen to her fervent admirer? At the first page, on the upper side of the book, there was no receptacle. "Nothing," he muttered. "Nothing," they echoed, palpitating with excitement. But at the last page, forcing back the book a little, he at once saw that the parchment was not stuck to the binding. He slipped his fingers in between. There was something. Yes, he felt something. A paper. "Oh," he gasped, in an accent almost of pain. "Here, is it possible?" "Quick, quick," they cried. "What are you waiting for?" He drew out a sheet, folded in two. "Well, read it. There are words in red ink. Look, it might be blood, pale, faded blood. Read it." He read, "To you, Fersen, for my son, the 16th of October, 1793. Marie Antoinette." And suddenly Beautrelet gave a cry of stupefaction. Under the Queen's signature there were 2 words, in black ink, underlined with a flourish. 2 words, Arsène Lupin. All in turns took the sheet of paper, and the same cry escaped from the lips of all of them. "Marie Antoinette! Arsène Lupin!" A great silence followed. That double signature, those 2 names coupled together, discovered hidden in the Book of Hours, that relic in which the poor Queen's desperate appeal had slumbered for more than a century, that horrible date of the 16th of October, 1793, the day on which the royal head fell. All of this was most dismally and disconcertingly tragic. "Arsène Lupin," stammered one of the voices, thus emphasizing the scare that underlay the sight of that demoniacal name at the foot of the hallowed page. "Yes, Arsène Lupin," repeated Beautrelet. The Queen's friend was unable to understand her desperate dying appeal. He lived with the keepsake in his possession which the woman whom he loved had sent him, and he never guessed the reason of that keepsake. Lupin discovered everything, on the other hand, and took it. Took what? The document, of course. The document written by Louis XVI, and it is that which I held in my hands. The same appearance, the same shape, the same red seals. I understand why Lupin would not leave me a document which I could turn to account by merely examining the paper, the seals, and so on. And then? Well then, since the document is genuine, since I have with my own eyes seen the marks of the red seals, since Marie Antoinette herself assures me by these few words in her hand that the whole story of the pamphlet, as printed by Monsieur Massiban, is correct. Because a problem of the Hollow Needle really exists, I am now certain to succeed. But how? Whether genuine or not, the document is of no use to you if you do not manage to decipher it, because Louis XVI destroyed the book that gave the explanation. Yes, but the other copy, which King Louis XVI's captain of the guards snatched from the flames, was not destroyed. How do you know? Prove the contrary. After uttering this defiance, Beautrelet was silent for a time, and then, slowly, with his eyes closed, as though trying to fix and sum up his thoughts, he said, "Possessing the secret, the captain of the guards begins by revealing it bit by bit in the journal found by his descendant. Then comes silence. The answer to the riddle is withheld. Why? Because the temptation to make use of the secret creeps over him little by little, and he gives way to it. A proof, his murder. A further proof, the magnificent jewel found upon him, which he must undoubtedly have taken from some royal treasure. the hiding place of which, unknown to all, would just constitute the mystery of the Hollow Needle. Lupin conveyed as much to me. Lupin was not lying. "Then what conclusion do you draw, Beautrelet?" "I draw this conclusion, my friends, that it be a good thing to advertise this story as much as possible, so that people may know, through all the papers, that we are looking for a book entitled The Treatise of the Needle. It may be fished out from the back shelves of some provincial library." The paragraph was drawn up forthwith, and Beautrelet set to work at once, without even waiting for it to produce a result. A first sense suggested itself. The murder was committed near Gaillon. He went there that same day. Certainly he did not hope to reconstruct a crime perpetrated 200 years ago. But, all the same, there are crimes that leave traces in the memories, in the traditions of a countryside. They are recorded in the local chronicles. One day, some provincial archaeologist, some lover of old legends, some student of the minor incidents of the life of the past, makes them the subject of an article in a newspaper or of a communication to the academy of his departmental town. Beautrelet saw 3 or 4 of these archaeologists. With one of them in particular, an old notary, he examined the prison records, the ledgers of the old bailiwicks, and the parish registers. There was no entry referring to the murder of a captain of the guards in the 17th century. He refused to be discouraged and continued his search in Paris, where the magistrate's examination might have taken place. His efforts came to nothing. But the thought of another track sent him off in a fresh direction. Was there no chance of finding out the name of that captain whose descendants served in the armies of the Republic and was quartered in the Temple during the imprisonment of the royal family? By dint of patient working, he ended by making out a list in which 2 names at least presented an almost complete resemblance: Monsieur de Larbeyrie under Louis XIV, and Citizen Larbry under the Terror. This already was an important point. He stated it with precision in a note which he sent to the papers, asking for any information concerning this Larbeyrie or his descendants. It was Monsieur Massibon, the Massibon of the pamphlet, the member of the Institute, who replied to him, "Sir, allow me to call your attention to the following passage of Voltaire, which I came upon in his manuscript of Le Siècle de Louis XIV. The passage has been suppressed in all the printed editions. I have heard it said by the late Monsieur de Caumartin, Intendant of Finance, who was a friend of Chamillard the minister, that the king one day left hurriedly in his carriage at the news that Monsieur de Larbeyrie had been murdered and robbed of some magnificent jewels. He seemed greatly excited and repeated, 'All is lost, all is lost.' In the following year, the son of this Larbeyrie and his daughter, who had married the Marquis de Vélines, were banished to their estates in Provence and Brittany. We cannot doubt that there is something peculiar in this. I, in my turn, will add that we can doubt it all the less inasmuch as Monsieur de Chamillard, according to Voltaire, was the last minister who possessed the strange secret of the Iron Mask. You will see for yourself, sir, the profit that can be derived from this passage and the evident link established between the 2 adventures. As for myself, I will not venture to imagine any very exact surmise as regards the conduct, the suspicions, and the apprehensions of Louis XIV in these circumstances. But, on the other hand, seeing that Monsieur de Larbeyrie left a son, who was probably the grandfather of Larbry, the citizen officer, and also a daughter, is it not permissible to suppose that a part of the papers left by Larbeyrie came to the daughter, and that among these papers was the famous copy which the captain of the guards saved from the flames? I have consulted the country house yearbook. There is a Baron de Vélines living not far from Rennes. Could he be a descendant of the Marquis? At any rate, I wrote to him yesterday, on chance, to ask if he had not in his possession a little old book bearing on its title page the word aiguille, and I am awaiting his reply. It would give me the greatest pleasure to talk of all these matters with you. If you can spare the time, come and see me. I am, sir, etc., etc. P.S. Of course, I shall not communicate these little discoveries to the press. Now that you are near the goal, discretion is essential. Beautrelet absolutely agreed. He even went further. To 2 journalists who were worrying him that morning, he gave the most fanciful particulars as to his plans and his state of mind. In the afternoon, He hurried round to see Massiban, who lived at 17, Quai Voltaire. To his great surprise, he was told that M. Massiban had gone out of town unexpectedly, leaving a note for him in case he should call. Isidore opened it and read, "I have received a telegram which gives me some hope, so I am leaving town and shall sleep at Rennes. You might take the evening train, and, without stopping at Rennes, go on to the little station of Valines. We would meet at the castle, which is 2.5 miles from the station." The program appealed to Beautrelet, and especially the idea that he would reach the castle at almost the same time as Massiban, for he feared some blunder on the part of that inexperienced man. He went back to his friend and spent the rest of the day with him. In the evening he took the Brittany Express and got out at Valines at 6 o'clock in the morning. He did the 2.5 miles between bushy woods on foot. He could see the castle perched on a height from a distance. It was a hybrid edifice, a mixture of the Renaissance and Louis-Philippe styles, but it bore a stately air nevertheless, with its 4 turrets and its ivy-mantled drawbridge. Isidore felt his heart beat as he approached. Was he really nearing the end of his race? Did the castle contain the key to the mystery? He was not without fear. It all seemed too good to be true. And he asked himself if he was not once more acting in obedience to some infernal plan contrived by Lupin, if Massiban was not, for instance, a tool in the hands of his enemy. He burst out laughing. "Tut, tut, I'm becoming absurd. One would really think that Lupin was an infallible person who foresees everything, a sort of divine omnipotence against whom nothing can prevail. Dash it all! Lupin makes his mistakes. Lupin, too, is at the mercy of circumstances. Lupin has an occasional slip, and it is just because of his slip, in losing the document, that I am beginning to have the advantage of him. Everything starts from that, and his efforts, when all is said, serve only to repair the first blunder." And blithely, full of confidence, Beautrelet rang the bell. "Yes, sir?" said the servant who opened the door. "Can I see the Baron de Valines?" And he gave the man his card. "Monsieur le Baron is not up yet, but if monsieur will wait—" "Has not someone else been asking for him?" "A gentleman with a white beard and a slight stoop?" asked Beautrelet, who knew Massiban's appearance from the photographs in the newspapers. "Yes, the gentleman came about 10 minutes ago. I showed him into the drawing-room. If monsieur will come this way—" The interview between Massiban and Beautrelet was of the most cordial character. Isidore thanked the old man for the first-rate information which he owed to him, and Massiban expressed his admiration for Beautrelet in the warmest terms. Then they exchanged impressions on the document, on their prospects of discovering the book, and Massiban repeated what he had heard at Rennes regarding M. de Valines. The Baron was a man of 60 who had been left a widower many years ago, and who led a very retired life with his daughter, Gabrielle de Villemont. This lady had just suffered a cruel blow through the loss of her husband and her eldest son, both of whom had died as the result of a motor-car accident. "Monsieur le Baron begs the gentleman to be good enough to come upstairs." The servant led the way to the first floor, to a large, bare-walled room, very simply furnished with desks, pigeonholes, and tables covered with papers and account books. The Baron received them very affably, and with the volubility often displayed by people who live too much alone. They had great difficulty in explaining the object of their visit. "Oh yes, I know, you wrote to me about it, M. Massiban. It has something to do with a book about a needle, hasn't it? A book which is supposed to have come down to me from my ancestors." "Just so. I may as well tell you that my ancestors and I have fallen out. They had funny ideas in those days. I belong to my own time. I have broken with the past." "Yes," said Beautrelet impatiently, "but have you no recollection of having seen the book?" "Certainly. I said so in my telegram," he exclaimed, addressing M. Massiban, who, in his annoyance, was walking up and down the room and looking out of the tall windows. "Certainly. Or at least, my daughter thought she had seen the title among the thousands of books that lumber up the library upstairs, for I don't care about reading myself. I don't even read the papers. My daughter does sometimes, but only when there is nothing the matter with Georges, her remaining son. As for me, as long as my tenants pay their rents and my leases are kept up, you see my account books. I live in them, gentlemen, and I confess that I know absolutely nothing whatever about that story of which you wrote to me in your letter, Monsieur Massiban. Isidore Beautrelet, nerve-shattered at all this talk, interrupted him bluntly. I beg your pardon, monsieur, but the book, my daughter has looked for it. My daughter has looked for it. She looked for it all day yesterday. Well, she found it. She found it a few hours ago, when you arrived. And where is it? Where is it? Why, she put it on that table. There it is, over there. Isidore gave a bound. At one end of the table, on a muddled heap of papers, lay a little book bound in red morocco. He banged his fist down upon it, as though he were forbidding anybody to touch it, and also a little as though he himself dared not take it up. Well, cried Massiban, greatly excited, I have it. Here it is. We're there at last. But the title, are you sure? Why, of course. Look, are you convinced? Have we mastered the secret at last? The front page. What does the front page say? Read. The whole truth now first exhibited. 100 copies printed by myself for the instruction of the court. That's it, muttered Massiban in a hoarse voice. It's the copy snatched from the flames. It's the very book which Louis XIV condemned. They turned over the pages. The first part set forth the explanations given by Captain de Larberie in his journal. Get on, said Beautrelet, who was in a hurry to come to the solution. Get on? What do you mean? Not at all. We know that the man with the iron mask was imprisoned because he knew and wished to divulge the secret of the royal house of France. But how did he know it? And why did he wish to divulge it? Lastly, who was that strange personage? A half-brother of Louis XIV, as Voltaire maintained, or Mattioli, the Italian minister, as the modern critics declare? Hang it, those are questions of the very first interest. Later, protested Beautrelet, feverishly turning the pages, as though he feared that the book would fly out of his hands before he had solved the riddle. But, said Massiban, who doted on historical details, we have plenty of time, afterward. Let's see the explanation first. Suddenly Beautrelet stopped. The document. In the middle of a left-hand page, his eyes saw the 5 mysterious lines of dots and figures. He made sure with a glance that the text was identical with that which he had studied so long, the same arrangement of the signs, the same intervals that permitted of the isolation of the word demoiselle and the separation of the 2 words aiguille and creuse. A short note preceded it. All the necessary indications, it appears, were reduced by King Louis XIII into a little table which I transcribe below. Here followed the table of dots and figures. Then came the explanation of the document itself. Beautrelet read, in a broken voice. As will be seen, this table, even after we have changed the figures into vowels, affords no light. One might say that, in order to decipher the puzzle, we must first know it. It is, at most, a clue given to those who know the paths of the labyrinth. Let us take this clue and proceed. I will guide you. The 4th line first. The 4th line contains measurements and indications. By complying with the indications and noting the measurements set down, we inevitably attain our object, on condition, be it understood, that we know where we are and whither we are going, in a word, that we are enlightened as to the real meaning of the Hollow Needle. This is what we may learn from the first 3 lines. The first is so conceived to revenge myself on the king. I had warned him, for that matter. Beautrelet stopped, nonplussed. What is it? Said Massiban. The words don't make sense. No more they do, replied Massiban. The first is so conceived to revenge myself on the king. What can that mean? Damn! Yelled Beautrelet. Well? Torn! 2 pages! The next 2 pages! Look at the marks." He trembled, shaking with rage and disappointment. Massiban bent forward. "It is true. There are the ends of 2 pages left, like bookbinders' guards. The marks seem pretty fresh. They've not been cut, but torn out with violence. Look, all the pages at the end of the book have been rumpled. But who can have done it?" "Who?" moaned Isidore, wringing his hands. "A servant? An accomplice? All the same, it may date back to a few months since," observed Massiban. Even so, someone must have hunted out and taken the book." "Tell me, monsieur," cried Beautrelet, addressing the Baron, "is there no one whom you suspect?" "We might ask my daughter." Yes, that's it. Perhaps she will know." Monsieur de Vélines rang for the footman. A few minutes later, Madame de Villemont entered. She was a young woman, with a sad and resigned face. Beautrelet at once asked her, "You found this volume upstairs, madame, in the library?" "Yes, in a parcel of books that had not been uncorded." "And you read it?" "Yes, last night." "When you read it, were those 2 pages missing? Try and remember. The 2 pages following this table of figures and dots?" "No, certainly not," she said, greatly astonished. "There was no page missing at all. Still, somebody has torn. But the book did not leave my room last night. And this morning?" "This morning, I brought it down here myself, when M. Massiban's arrival was announced. Then, well, I don't understand, but no." "What? Georges? My son this morning? Georges was playing with the book." She ran out headlong, accompanied by Beautrelet, Massiban, and the Baron. The child was not in his room. They hunted in every direction. At last they found him playing behind the castle. But those 3 people seemed so excited and called him so peremptorily to account that he began to yell aloud. Everybody ran about to right and left. The servants were questioned. It was an indescribable tumult, and Beautrelet received the awful impression that the truth was ebbing away from him, like water trickling through his fingers. He made an effort to recover himself, took Madame de Villemont's arm, and, followed by the Baron and Massiban, led her back to the drawing-room and said, "The book is incomplete." "Very well. There are 2 pages torn out, but you read them, did you not, madame?" "Yes." "You know what they contained?" "Yes." "Could you repeat it to us?" "Certainly. I read the book with a great deal of curiosity, but those 2 pages struck me in particular because the revelations were so very interesting." "Well then, speak, madame, speak, I implore you. Those revelations are of exceptional importance. Speak, I beg of you. Minutes lost are never recovered." "The hollow needle." "Oh, it's quite simple. The hollow needle means—" At that moment, a footman entered the room. "A letter from madame." "Oh, but the postman has passed." "A boy brought it." Madame de Villemont opened the letter, read it, and put her hand to her heart, turning suddenly livid and terrified, ready to faint. The paper had slipped to the floor. Beautrelet picked it up, and without troubling to apologize, read, "Not a word. If you say a word, your son will never wake again." "My son? My son?" she stammered, too weak even to go to the assistance of the threatened child. Beautrelet reassured her. "It is not serious. It's a joke. Come, who could be interested?" "Unless," suggested Massiban, "it was Arsène Lupin." Beautrelet made him a sign to hold his tongue. He knew quite well, of course, that the enemy was there, once more, watchful and determined, and that was just why he wanted to tear from Madame de Villemont the decisive words, so long awaited, and to tear them from her on the spot, that very moment. "I beseech you, madame, compose yourself. We are all here. There is not the least danger." Would she speak? He thought so. He hoped so. She stammered out a few syllables. But the door opened again. This time, the nurse entered. She seemed distraught. "Monsieur Georges, madame, Monsieur Georges." Suddenly, the mother recovered all her strength. Quicker than any of them, and urged by an unfailing instinct, she rushed down the staircase, across the hall, and on to the terrace. There lay little Georges, motionless on a wicker chair. "Well, what is it? He's asleep." "He fell asleep suddenly, madame," said the nurse. "I tried to prevent him, to carry him to his room, but he was fast asleep, and his hands were cold." "Cold?" gasped the mother. "Yes, it's true. Oh dear, if he only wakes up." Beautrelet put his hand in his trousers pocket, seized the butt of his revolver, cocked it with his forefinger, then suddenly produced the weapon and fired at Massiban. Massiban, as though he were watching the boy's movements, had avoided the shot, so to speak, in advance, but already Beautrelet had sprung upon him, shouting to the servants, "Help! It's Lupin!" Massiban, under the weight of the impact, fell back into one of the wicker chairs. In a few seconds he rose, leaving Beautrelet stunned, choking, and holding the young man's revolver in his hands. "Good! That's all right. Don't stir. You'll be like that for 2 or 3 minutes, no more. But upon my word, you took your time to recognize me. Was my makeup as old Massiban so good as all that?" He was now standing straight up on his legs, his body squared, in a formidable attitude, and he grinned as he looked at the 3 petrified footmen and the dumbfounded Baron. "Isidore, you've missed the chance of a lifetime. If you hadn't told them I was Lupin, they'd have jumped on me, and, with fellows like that, what would have become of me, by Jove, with 4 to 1 against me?" He walked up to them. "Come, my lads, don't be afraid. I shan't hurt you. Wouldn't you like a sugar stick apiece to screw your courage up? Oh, you, by the way, hand me back my 100-franc note, will you? Yes, I know you. You're the one I bribed just now to give the letter to your mistress. Come, hurry, you faithless servant." He took the blue banknote which the servant handed him and tore it into tiny shreds. "The price of treachery! It burns my fingers!" He took off his hat, and, bowing very low before Madame de Villemont, "Will you forgive me, madame? The accidents of life, of mine especially, often drive one to acts of cruelty for which I am the first to blush. But have no fear for your son. It's a mere prick, a little puncture in the arm which I gave him while we were questioning him. In an hour, at the most, you won't know that it happened. Once more, all my apologies, but I had to make sure of your silence." He bowed again, thanked Monsieur de Villens for his kind hospitality, took his cane, lit a cigarette, offered one to the Baron, gave a circular sweep with his hat, and, in a patronizing tone, said to Beautrelet, "Goodbye, baby." And he walked away quietly, puffing the smoke of his cigarette into the servants' faces. Beautrelet waited for a few minutes. Madame de Villemont, now calmer, was watching by her son. He went up to her, with the intention of making one last appeal to her. Their eyes met. He said nothing. He had understood that she would never speak now, whatever happened. There, once more, in that mother's brain, the secret of the Hollow Needle lay buried as deeply as in the night of the past. Then he gave up and went away. It was 10:30. There was a train at 11:50. He slowly followed the avenue and the park and turned into the road that led to the station. Well, what do you say to that? It was Massiban, or rather Lupin, who appeared out of the wood adjoining the road. Was it pretty well contrived, or was it not? Is your old friend great on the tightrope, or is he not? I'm sure that you haven't got over it, eh? And that you're asking yourself whether the so-called Massiban, member of the Academy of Inscriptions and Belles-Lettres, ever existed. But, of course, he exists. I'll even show him to you if you're good. But first, let me give you back your revolver. You're looking to see if it's loaded? Certainly, my lad. There are 5 charges left, one of which would be enough to send me ad patres. Well, so you're putting it in your pocket? Quite right. I prefer that to what you did up there. A nasty little impulse, that of yours. Still, you're young. You suddenly see, in a flash, that you've once more been done by that confounded Lupin, and that he is standing there in front of you at 3 steps from you, and bang! You fire. I'm not angry with you, bless your little heart. To prove it, I offer you a seat in my 100H page car. Will that suit you? He put his fingers to his mouth and whistled. The contrast was delicious between the venerable appearance of this elderly Massiban and the schoolboy ways and accent which Lupin was putting on. Beautrelet could not help laughing. "He's laughed! He's laughed!" cried Lupin, jumping for joy. "You see, baby, what you fall short in is the power of smiling. You're a trifle serious for your age. You're a very likable boy. You have a charming candor and simplicity, but you have no sense of humor." He placed himself in front of him. "Look here, bet you I make you cry. Do you know how I was able to follow up all your inquiry, how I knew of the letter Massiban wrote you, and his appointment to meet you this morning at the Château de Villene? Through the prattle of your friend, the one you're staying with. You confide in that idiot and he loses no time, but goes and tells everything to his best girl. And his best girl has no secrets for Lupin. What did I tell you? I've made you feel anyhow. Your eyes are quite wet. Friendship betrayed. That upsets you, eh? Upon my word, you're wonderful. I could take you in my arms and hug you. You always wear that look of astonishment which goes straight to my heart. I shall never forget the other evening at Gaillon when you consulted me. Yes, I was the old notary. But why don't you laugh, youngster? As I said, you have no sense of a joke. Look here, what you want is, what shall I call it? Imagination. Imaginative impulse. Now, I'm full of imaginative impulse. A motor was heard panting not far off. Lupin seized Beautrelet roughly by the arm, and in a cold voice, looking him straight in the eyes. You're going to keep quiet now, aren't you? You can see there's nothing to be done. Then what's the use of wasting your time and energy? There are plenty of highway robbers in the world. Run after them and let me be. If not, it's settled, isn't it? He shook him as though to enforce his will upon him. Then he grinned. Fool that I am! You leave me alone? You're not one of those who let go. Oh, I don't know what restrains me. In half a dozen turns of the wrist, I could have you bound and gagged, and in 2 hours, safe under lock and key, for some months to come. And then I could twist my thumbs in all security, withdraw to the peaceful retreat prepared for me by my ancestors, the kings of France, and enjoy the treasures which they have been good enough to accumulate for me. But no, it is doomed that I must go on blundering to the end. I can't help it, we all have our weaknesses, and I have one for you. Besides, it's not done yet. From now until you put your finger into the hollow of the needle, a good deal of water will flow under the bridges. Dash it all, it took me 10 days. Me, Lupin, you will want 10 years at least. There's that much distance between us after all. The motor arrived, an immense closed car. Lupin opened the door and Beautrelet gave a cry. There was a man inside, and that man was Lupin, or rather, Massiban. Suddenly understanding, he burst out laughing. Lupin said, "Don't be afraid, he's sound asleep. I promised that you should see him. Do you grasp the situation now? At midnight I knew of your appointment at the castle. At 7 in the morning I was there. When Massiban passed, I had only to collect him, give him a tiny prick with a needle, and the thing was done. Sleep, old chap, sleep away. We'll set you down on the slope. That's it. There. Capital. Right in the sun. Then you won't catch cold. Good. And our hat in our hand. Spare a copper, kind gentleman. Oh, my dear old Massiban, so you were after Arsène Lupin." It was really a huge joke to see the two Massibans face to face, one asleep with his head on his chest, the other seriously occupied in paying him every sort of attention and respect. Pity a poor blind man. There, Massiban, here's 2 sous and my visiting card. And now, my lads, off we go at the 4th speed. Do you hear, driver? You've got to do 75 miles an hour. Jump in, Isidore. There's a full sitting of the Institute today, and Massiban is to read a little paper on I don't know what, at 3:30. Well, he'll read them his little paper. I'll dish them up a complete Massiban, more real than the real one, with my own ideas, on the lacustrine inscriptions. I don't have an opportunity of lecturing at the Institute every day. Faster, chauffeur. We're only doing 71.5. Are you afraid? Remember you're with Lupin. Ah, Isidore, and then people say that life is monotonous. Why, life's an adorable thing, my boy. Only one has to know, and I know. Wasn't it enough to make a man jump out of his skin for joy just now at the castle when you were chattering with old Valines and I up against the window was tearing out the pages of the historic book? And then, when you were questioning the Dame de Villemont about the Hollow Needle, would she speak? Yes, she would. No, she wouldn't. Yes, no. It gave me gooseflesh, I assure you. If she spoke, I should have to build up my life anew. The whole scaffolding was destroyed. Would the footman come in time? Yes, no, there he is. But Beautrelet will unmask me. Never, he's too much of a flat. Yes, though, no, there, he's done it. No, he hasn't. Yes, he's eyeing me. That's it, he's feeling for his revolver. Oh, the delight of it. Isidore, you're talking too much. You'll hurt yourself. Let's have a snooze, shall we? I'm dying of sleep. Good night. Beautrelet looked at him. He seemed almost asleep already. He slept. The motor car, darting through space, rushed toward a horizon that was constantly reached and as constantly retreated. There was no impression of towns, villages, fields, or forests, simply space, space devoured, swallowed up. Beautrelet looked at his traveling companion for a long time, with eager curiosity, and also with a keen wish to fathom his real character through the mask that covered it. And he thought of the circumstances that confined them, like that, together, in the close contact of that motor car. But, after the excitement and disappointment of the morning, tired in his turn, he too fell asleep. When he woke, Lupin was reading. Beautrelet leant over to see the title of the book. It was the Epistolae ad Lucilium of Seneca the philosopher. Chapter 8. From Caesar to Lupin. Dash it all, it took me 10 days. Me, Lupin, you will want 10 years at least. These words, uttered by Lupin after leaving the Château de Valine, had no little influence on Beautrelet's conduct. Though very calm in the main and invariably master of himself, Lupin, nevertheless, was subject to moments of exaltation, of a more or less romantic expansiveness, at once theatrical and good-humored, when he allowed certain admissions to escape him, certain imprudent speeches which a boy like Beautrelet could easily turn to profit. Rightly or wrongly, Beautrelet read one of these involuntary admissions into that phrase. He was entitled to conclude that, if Lupin drew a comparison between his own efforts and Beautrelet's in pursuit of the truth about the Hollow Needle, it was because the two of them possessed identical means of attaining their object, because Lupin had no elements of success different from those possessed by his adversary. The chances were alike. Now, with the same chances, the same elements of success, the same means, 10 days had been enough for Lupin. What were those elements, those means, those chances? They were reduced, when all was said, to a knowledge of the pamphlet published in 1815, a pamphlet which Lupin, no doubt like Massiban, had found by accident and thanks to which he had succeeded in discovering the indispensable document in Marie Antoinette's Book of Hours. Therefore, the pamphlet and the document were the only two fundamental facts upon which Lupin had relied. With these he had built up the whole edifice. He had had no extraneous aid. The study of the pamphlet and the study of the document, full stop. That was all. Well, could not Beautrelet confine himself to the same ground? What was the use of an impossible struggle? What was the use of those vain investigations, in which, even supposing that he avoided the pitfalls that were multiplied under his feet, he was sure, in the end, to achieve the poorest of results? His decision was clear and immediate, and, in adopting it, he had the happy instinct that he was on the right path. He began by leaving his Janson de Sailly schoolfellow without indulging in useless recriminations, and, taking his portmanteau with him, went and installed himself, after much hunting about, in a small hotel situated in the very heart of Paris. This hotel he did not leave for days. At most, he took his meals at the table d'hôte. The rest of the time, locked in his room, with the window curtains close drawn, he spent in thinking. 10 days, Arsène Lupin had said. Beautrelet, striving to forget all that he had done and to remember only the elements of the pamphlet and the document, aspired eagerly to keep within the limit of those 10 days. However, the 10th day passed, and the 11th and the 12th, but on the 13th day a gleam lit up his brain, and, very soon, with the bewildering rapidity of those ideas which develop in us like miraculous plants, the truth emerged, blossomed, gathered strength. On the evening of the 13th day, he certainly did not know the answer to the problem, but he knew, to a certainty, one of the methods which Lupin had, beyond a doubt, employed. It was a very simple method, hinging on this one question. Is there a link of any sort uniting all the more or less important historic events with which the pamphlet connects the mystery of the Hollow Needle? The great diversity of these events made the question difficult to answer. Still, the profound examination to which Beautrelet applied himself ended by pointing to one essential characteristic which was common to them all. Each one of them, without exception, had happened within the boundaries of the old kingdom of Neustria, which correspond very nearly with those of our present-day Normandy. All the heroes of the fantastic adventure are Norman, or become Norman, or play their part in the Norman country. What a fascinating procession through the ages! What a rousing spectacle was that of all those barons, dukes, and kings, starting from such widely opposite points to meet in this particular corner of the world. Beautrelet turned the pages of history at haphazard. It was Rolf, or Roux, or Rollo, first Duke of Normandy, who was master of the secret of the needle, according to the Treaty of St. Clair-sur-Epte. It was William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy and King of England, whose banner staff was pierced like a needle. It was at Rouen that the English burnt Joan of Arc, mistress of the secret. And right at the beginning of the adventure, who is that chief of the Coletti, who pays his ransom to Caesar, with the secret of the needle but the chief of the men of the Caw country, which lies in the very heart of Normandy? The supposition becomes more definite. The field narrows. Rouen, the banks of the Seine, the Caw country. It really seems as though all roads lead in that direction. 2 kings of France are mentioned more particularly, after the secret is lost by the Dukes of Normandy and their heirs, the kings of England, and becomes the royal secret of France, and these 2 are King Henry IV, who laid siege to Rouen and won the Battle of Arques, near Dieppe, and Francis I, who founded the Havre and uttered that suggestive phrase, "The kings of France carry secrets that often decide the fate of towns." Rouen, Dieppe, the Havre, the 3 angles of the triangle, the 3 large towns that occupy the 3 points. In the center, the Caw country. The 17th century arrives. Louis XIV burns the book in which a person unknown reveals the truth. Captain de Larbeyrie masters a copy, profits by the secret thus obtained, steals a certain number of jewels, and dies by the hand of highway murderers. Now at which spot is the ambush laid? At Gaillon. At Gaillon, a little town on the road leading from Havre, Rouen, or Dieppe to Paris. A year later, Louis XIV buys a domain and builds the Château de Leguy. Where does he select his site? In the Midlands of France, with the result that the curious are thrown off the scent and do not hunt about in Normandy. Rouen, Dieppe, the Havre, the Cauchois Triangle, everything lies there. On one side, the sea. On another, the Seine. On the third, the 2 valleys that lead from Rouen to Dieppe. A light flashed across Beautrelet's mind. That extent of ground, that country of the high tablelands which run from the cliffs of the Seine to the cliffs of the Channel, almost invariably constituted the field of operations of Arsène Lupin. For 10 years it was just this district which he parceled out for his purposes, as though he had his haunt in the very center of the region, with which the legend of the Hollow Needle was most closely connected. The affair of Baron Cahorn, or the banks of the Seine between Rouen and the Havre? The Thibermesnil case? At the other end of the tableland, between Rouen and Dieppe, the Gruchet-Montigny-Crasville burglaries? In the midst of the Caw country, where was Lupin going when he was attacked and bound hand and foot? In his compartment by Pierre Onfray, the Auteuil murderer. to Rouen. Where was Holmlock Shears, Lupin's prisoner, put on board ship? Near the Havre. And what was the scene of the whole of the present tragedy? Brumézy, on the road between the Havre and Dieppe. Rouen, Dieppe, the Havre. Always the Cauchois triangle. And so, a few years earlier, possessing the pamphlet and knowing the hiding place in which Marie Antoinette had concealed the document, Arsène Lupin had ended by laying his hand on the famous Book of Hours. Once in possession of the document, he took the field, found, and settled down as in a conquered country. Beautrelet took the field. He set out in genuine excitement, thinking of the same journey which Lupin had taken, of the same hopes with which he must have throbbed when he thus went in search of the tremendous secret which was to arm him with so great a power. Would his, Beautrelet's, efforts have the same victorious results? He left Rouen early in the morning, on foot, with his face very much disguised and his bag at the end of a stick on his shoulder, like an apprentice doing his round of France. He walked straight to Duclair, where he lunched. On leaving this town he followed the Seine, and practically did not lose sight of it again. His instinct, strengthened moreover by numerous influences, always brought him back to the sinuous banks of the stately river. When the Château de Malaquis was robbed, the objects stolen from Baron Cahorn's collection were sent by way of the Seine. The old carvings removed from the chapel at Brumézy were carried to the Seine bank. He pictured the whole fleet of pinnaces performing a regular service between Rouen and the Havre, and draining the works of art and treasures from a countryside to dispatch them thence to the land of millionaires. I'm burning, muttered the boy, gasping under the truth, which came to him in a mighty series of shocks and took away his breath. The checks encountered on the first few days did not discourage him. He had a firm and profound belief in the correctness of the supposition that was guiding him. It was bold, perhaps, and extravagant. No matter, it was worthy of the adversary pursued. The supposition was on a level with the prodigious reality that bore the name of Lupin. With a man like that, of what good could it be to look elsewhere than in the domain of the enormous, the exaggerated, the superhuman? Jumièges, the Mailleraie, Saint-Andriot, Caudebec, Tancarville, Quillebeuf were places filled with his memories. How often he must have contemplated the glory of their Gothic steeples or the splendor of their immense ruins. But the Havre, the neighborhood of the Havre, drew Isidore like a beacon fire. The kings of France carry secrets that often decide the fate of towns. Cryptic words which, suddenly, for Beautrelet shone bright with clearness. Was this not an exact statement of the reasons that determined Francis I to create a town on this spot? And was not the fate of the Havre de Grace linked with the very secret of the needle? That's it, stammered Beautrelet excitedly. The old Norman estuary, one of the essential points, one of the original centers around which our French nationality was formed, is completed by those two forces, one in full view, alive, known to all, the new port commanding the ocean and opening on the world, the other dim and obscure, unknown and all the more alarming, inasmuch as it is invisible and impalpable. A whole side of the history of France and of the royal house is explained by the needle, even as it explains the whole story of Arsène Lupin. The same sources of energy and power supply and renew the fortunes of kings and of the adventurer. Beautrelet ferreted and snuffed from village to village, from the river to the sea, with his nose in the wind, his ears pricked, trying to compel the inanimate things to surrender their deep meaning. Ought this hill slope to be questioned, or that forest, or the houses of this hamlet? Or was it among the insignificant phrases spoken by that peasant yonder that he might hope to gather the one little illuminating word? One morning he was lunching at an inn, within sight of Honfleur, the old city of the estuary. Opposite him was sitting one of those heavy, red-haired Norman horse-dealers who do the fairs of the district, whip in hand, and clad in a long smock frock. After a moment it seemed to Beautrelet that the man was looking at him with a certain amount of attention, as though he knew him, or at least was trying to recognize him. Pooh, he thought, there's some mistake. I've never seen that merchant before, nor he me." As a matter of fact, the man appeared to take no further interest in him. He lit his pipe, called for coffee and brandy, smoked and drank. When Beautrelet had finished his meal, he paid and rose to go. A group of men entered just as he was about to leave, and he had to stand for a few seconds near the table at which the horse-dealer sat. He then heard the man say in a low voice, "Good afternoon, Monsieur Beautrelet." Without hesitation, Isidore sat down beside the man and said, "Yes, that is my name. But who are you? How did you know me?" "That's not difficult. And yet, I've only seen your portrait in the papers. But you are so badly, what do you call it in French? So badly made up." He had a pronounced foreign accent, and Beautrelet seemed to perceive, as he looked at him, that he too wore a facial disguise that entirely altered his features. "Who are you?" he repeated. "Who are you?" The stranger smiled. "Don't you recognize me?" "No, I never saw you before, nor I you. But think, the papers print my portrait also, and pretty often. Well, have you got it? No, Holmlock Shears. It was an amusing and, at the same time, a significant meeting." The boy at once saw the full bearing of it. After an exchange of compliments, he said to Shears, "I suppose that you are here because of him?" "Yes. So, you think we have a chance in this direction?" "I'm sure of it." Beautrelet's delight at finding that Shears's opinion agreed with his own was not unmingled with other feelings. If the Englishman attained his object, it meant that, at the very best, the two would share the victory. And who could tell that Shears would not attain it first? "Have you any proofs? Any clues?" "Don't be afraid," grinned the Englishman, who understood his uneasiness. "I am not treading on your heels. With you, it's the document, the pamphlet, things that do not inspire me with any great confidence. And with you, with me, it's something different. Should I be indiscreet if—" "Not at all. You remember the story of the coronet, the story of the Duc de Charmerac?" "Yes. You remember Victoire, Lupin's old foster-mother, the one whom my good friend Ganimard allowed to escape in a sham prison van?" "Yes. I have found Victoire's traces. She lives on a farm, not far from National Road number 25. National Road number 25 is the road from the Havre to Lille. Through Victoire I shall easily get at Lupin." "It will take long." "No matter. I have dropped all my cases. This is the only one I care about. Between Lupin and me, it's a fight to the death." He spoke these words with a sort of ferocity that betrayed all his bitterness at the humiliations which he had undergone, all his fierce hatred of the great enemy who had tricked him so cruelly. "Go away now," he whispered. "We are observed. It's dangerous. But mark my words. On the day when Lupin and I meet face to face, it will be tragic." Beautrelet felt quite reassured on leaving Shears. He need not fear that the Englishman would gain on him. And here was one more proof which this chance interview had brought him. The road from the Havre to Lille passes through Dieppe. It is the great seaside road of the Caen country, the coast road commanding the Channel cliffs. And it was on a farm near this road that Victoire was installed. Victoire, that is to say Lupin. For one did not move without the other, the master without the blindly devoted servant. I'm burning," he repeated to himself. "Whenever circumstances bring me a new element of information, it confirms my supposition. On the one hand, I have the absolute certainty of the banks of the Seine. On the other, the certainty of the national road. The two means of communication meet at the Havre, the town of Francis I, the town of the secret. The boundaries are contracting. The Caen country is not large, and even so, I have only the western portion of the Caen country to search." He set to work with renewed stubbornness. "Anything that Lupin has found," he kept on saying to himself, "there is no reason for my not finding. Certainly, Lupin had some great advantage over him, perhaps a thorough acquaintance with the country, a precise knowledge of the local legends, or, less than that, a memory. Invaluable advantages these, for he, Beautrelet, knew nothing, was totally ignorant of the country, which he had first visited at the time of the Ambrumésy burglary, and then only rapidly, without lingering. But what did it matter? Though he had to devote 10 years of his life to this investigation, he would carry it to a successful issue. Lupin was there. He could see him, he could feel him there. He expected to come upon him at the next turn of the road, on the skirt of the next wood, outside the next village. And though continually disappointed, he seemed to find in each disappointment a fresh reason for persisting. Often he would fling himself on the slope by the roadside and plunge into wild examination of the copy of the document which he always carried on him, a copy, that is to say, with vowels taking the place of the figures. Often, also, according to his habit, he would lie down flat on his stomach in the tall grass and think for hours. He had time enough. The future belonged to him. With wonderful patience, he tramped from the Seine to the sea, and from the sea to the Seine, going gradually farther, retracing his steps and never quitting the ground, until, theoretically speaking, there was not a chance left of gathering the smallest particle upon it. He studied and explored Montevilliers and Saint-Romani, and Octeville, and Gonneville, and Criquetot. At night, he knocked at the peasants' doors and asked for a lodging. After dinner, they smoked together and chatted. He made them tell him the stories which they told one another on the long winter nights. And he never omitted to insinuate, slyly, "What about the needle, the legend of the hollow needle? Don't you know that?" "Upon my word, I don't. Never heard of it. Just think, an old wives' tale, something that has to do with a needle. An enchanted needle, perhaps. I don't know. Nothing. No legend, no recollection." And the next morning he walked blithely away again. One day he passed through the pretty village of Saint-Jouin, which overlooks the sea, and, descending among the chaos of rocks that have slipped from cliffs, he climbed up to the tableland and went in the direction of the dry valley of Bruneval, Cap d'Antifer, and the little creek of Belle-Plage. He was walking gaily and lightly, feeling a little tired, perhaps, but glad to be alive. So glad, even, that he forgot Lupin and the mystery of the hollow needle and Victoire and Shears, and interested himself in the sight of nature, the blue sky, the great emerald sea, all glittering in the sunshine. Some straight slopes and remains of brick walls, in which he seemed to recognize the vestiges of a Roman camp, interested him. Then his eyes fell upon a sort of little castle, built in imitation of an ancient fort, with cracked turrets and Gothic windows. It stood on a jagged, rugged, rising promontory, almost detached from the cliff. A barred gate, flanked by iron handrails and bristling spikes, guarded the narrow passage. Beautrelet succeeded in climbing over, not without some difficulty. Over the pointed door, which was closed with an old rusty lock, he read the words, "Fort de Fréfossé." He did not attempt to enter, but turning to the right after going down a little slope, he embarked upon a path that ran along a ridge of land furnished with a wooden handrail. Right at the end was a cave of very small dimensions, forming a sort of watchtower at the point of the rock in which it was hollowed out, a rock falling abruptly into the sea. There was just room to stand up in the middle of the cave. Multitudes of inscriptions crossed one another on the walls. An almost square hole, cut in the stone, opened like a dormer window on the land side, exactly opposite Fort Fréfossé, the crenellated top of which appeared at 30 or 40 yards distance. Beautrelet threw off his knapsack and sat down. He had had a hard and tiring day. He fell asleep for a little. Then the cool wind that blew inside the cave woke him up. He sat for a few minutes without moving, absent-minded, vague-eyed. He tried to reflect, to recapture his still torpid thoughts. And, as he recovered his consciousness, he was on the point of rising, when he received the impression that his eyes, suddenly fixed, suddenly wide open, saw, A thrill shook him from head to foot. His hands clutched convulsively, and he felt the beads of perspiration forming at the roots of his hair. "No, no," he stammered. "It's a dream, an hallucination. Let's look. It's not possible." He plunged down on his knees and stooped over. 2 huge letters, each perhaps a foot long, appeared cut in relief in the granite of the floor. Those 2 letters, clumsily but plainly carved, with their corners rounded and their surface smoothed by the wear and tear of centuries, were a D and an F. D and F. Oh, bewildering miracle. D and F, just 2 letters of the document. Oh, Beautrelet had no need to consult it to bring before his mind that group of letters in the 4th line, the line of the measurements and indications. He knew them well. They were inscribed for all time at the back of his pupils, encrusted for good and all in the very substance of his brain. He rose to his feet, went down the steep road, climbed back along the old fort, hung on to the spikes of the rail again in order to pass, and walked briskly toward a shepherd whose flock was grazing some way off on a dip in the tableland. "That cave! Over there! That cave!" His lips trembled, and he tried to find the words that would not come. The shepherd looked at him in amazement. At last, Isidore repeated, "Yes, that cave, over there, to the right of the fort. Has it a name?" "Yes, I should think so. All the Treatise folk like to call it the Demoiselle." "What? What? What's that you say?" "Why, of course, it's the Chambre des Demoiselles." Isidore felt like flying at his throat, as though all the truth lived in that man, and he hoped to get it from him at one swoop, to tear it from him. "The Demoiselle!" One of the words, one of the only 3 known words of the document. A whirlwind of madness shook Beautrelet where he stood, and it rose all around him, blew upon him like a tempestuous squall that came from the sea, that came from the land, that came from every direction, and whipped him with great lashes of the truth. He understood. The document appeared to him in its real sense. The Chambre des Demoiselles, et Treatise. That's it, he thought, his brain filled with light. It must be that. "But why didn't I guess earlier?" he said to the shepherd in a low voice. "That will do. Go away. You can go. Thank you." The man, not knowing what to think, whistled to his dog and went. Left alone, Beautrelet returned to the fort. He had almost passed it when, suddenly, he dropped to the ground and lay cowering against a piece of wall. And, wringing his hands, he thought, "I must be mad. If he were to see me, or his accomplices, I've been moving about for an hour." He did not stir another limb. The sun went down. Little by little, the night mingled with the day, blurring the outline of things. Then, with little imperceptible movements, flat on his stomach, gliding, crawling, he crept along one of the points of the promontory to the extreme edge of the cliff. He reached it. Stretching out his hands, he pushed aside some tufts of grass, and his head appeared over the precipice. Opposite him, almost level with the cliff, in the open sea rose an enormous rock, over 80 yards high, a colossal obelisk, standing straight on its granite base, which showed at the surface of the water, and tapering toward the summit, like the giant tooth of a monster of the deep. White with the dirty gray white of the cliff, the awful monolith was streaked with horizontal lines marked by flint and displaying the slow work of the centuries, which had heaped alternate layers of lime and pebblestone one atop of the other. Here and there, a fissure, a break, and, wherever these occurred, a scrap of earth, with grass and leaves. And all this was mighty and solid and formidable, with the look of an indestructible thing against which the furious assault of the waves and storms could not prevail. And it was definite and permanent and grand, despite the grandeur of the cliffy rampart that commanded it, despite the immensity of the space in which it stood. Beautrelet's nails dug into the soil like the claws of an animal ready to leap upon its prey. His eyes penetrated the wrinkled texture of the rock, penetrated its skin, so it seemed to him, its very flesh. He touched it, felt it, took cognizance and possession of it, absorbed and assimilated it. The horizon turned crimson with all the flames of the vanished sun, and long, red clouds, set motionless in the sky, formed glorious landscapes, fantastic lagoons, fiery plains, forests of gold, lakes of blood, a whole glowing and peaceful phantasmagoria. The blue of the sky grew darker, Venus shone with a marvelous brightness, then other stars lit up, timid as yet, and Beautrelet suddenly closed his eyes and convulsively pressed his folded arms to his forehead. Over there! Oh, he felt as though he would die for joy, so great was the cruel emotion that wrung his heart. Over there, almost at the top of the needle of Treatise, a little below the extreme point round which the sea mews fluttered, a thread of smoke came filtering through a crevice, as though from an invisible chimney. A thread of smoke rose in slow spirals in the calm air of the twilight. Chapter 9. Open Sesame. The Treatise needle was hollow. Was it a natural phenomenon, an excavation produced by internal cataclysms, or by the imperceptible action of the rushing sea and the soaking rain? Or was it a superhuman work executed by human beings, Gauls, Celts, prehistoric men? These, no doubt, were insoluble questions, and what did it matter? The essence of the thing was contained in this fact: the needle was hollow. At 40 or 50 yards from that imposing arch which is called the Porte d'Aval, and which shoots out from the top of the cliff like the colossal branch of a tree, to take root in the submerged rocks, stands an immense limestone cone, and this cone is no more than the shell of a pointed cap poised upon the empty waters. A prodigious revelation. After Lupin, here was Beautrelet discovering the key to the great riddle that had loomed over more than 20 centuries. A key of supreme importance to whoever possessed it in the days of old, in those distant times when hordes of barbarians rode through and overran the old world. A magic key that opens the Cyclopean cavern to whole tribes fleeing before the enemy. A mysterious key that guards the door of the most inviolable shelter. An enchanted key that gives power and ensures preponderance. Because he knows this key, Caesar is able to subdue Gaul. Because they know it, the Normans force their sway upon the country, and from there, later, backed by that support, conquer the neighboring island, conquer Sicily, conquer the East, conquer the New World. Masters of the secret, the kings of England lord it over France, humble her, dismember her, have themselves crowned at Paris. They lose the secret, and the rout begins. Masters of the secret, the kings of France push back and overstep the narrow limits of their dominion, gradually founding a great nation and radiating with glory and power. They forget it, or know not how to use it, and death, exile, ruin follow. An invisible kingdom, in mid-water and at 10 fathoms from land. An unknown fortress, taller than the towers of Notre Dame, and built upon a granite foundation larger than a public square. What strength and what security! From Paris to the sea, by the Seine. There, the Havre, the new town, the necessary town. And 16 miles thence, the hollow needle, the impregnable sanctuary. It is a sanctuary and also a stupendous hiding place. All the treasures of the kings, increasing from century to century, all the gold of France, all that they extort from the people, all that they snatch from the clergy, all the booty gathered on the battlefields of Europe lie heaped up in the royal cave. Old Merovingian gold sous, glittering crown pieces, doubloons, ducats, florins, guineas, and the precious stones and the diamonds, and all the jewels, and all the ornaments. Everything is there. Who could discover it? Who could ever learn the impenetrable secret of the needle? Nobody. And Lupin becomes that sort of really disproportionate being whom we know, that miracle, incapable of explanation, so long as the truth remains in the shadow. Infinite though the resources of his genius be, they cannot suffice for the mad struggle which he maintains against society. He needs other, more material resources. He needs a sure place of retreat. He needs the certainty of impunity, the peace that allows of the execution of his plans. Without the Hollow Needle, Lupin is incomprehensible, a myth, a character in a novel, having no connection with reality. Master of the secret, and of such a secret, he becomes simply a man like another, but gifted with the power of wielding in a superior manner the extraordinary weapon with which destiny has endowed him. So the needle was hollow. It remained to discover how one obtained access to it. From the sea, obviously. There must be, on the side of the offing, some fissure where boats could land at certain hours of the tide. But on the side of the land, Beautrelet lay until 10 o'clock at night, hanging over the precipice, with his eyes riveted on the shadowy mass formed by the pyramid, thinking and pondering with all the concentrated effort of his mind. Then he went down to Treatise, selected the cheapest hotel, dined, went up to his room and unfolded the document. It was the merest child's play to him now to establish its exact meaning. He at once saw that the 3 vowels of the word Treatise occurred in the first line, in their proper order and at the necessary intervals. This first line now read as follows: E. A. Treatise. A. What words could come before Treatise? Words, no doubt, that referred to the position of the needle with regard to the town. Now the needle stood on the left, on the west. He ransacked his memory, and, recollecting that westerly winds are called vents d'aval on the coast, and that the nearest port was known as the Port d'Aval, he wrote down, En aval des Treatise, O. The second line was that containing the word demoiselle, and at once seeing in front of that word the series of all the vowels that form part of the words la chambre des, he noted the 2 phrases, En aval des Treatise, La chambre des demoiselles. The third line gave him more trouble, and it was not until some groping that, remembering the position near the chambre des demoiselles of the Fort de Fréfossé, he ended by almost completely reconstructing the document. En aval des Treatise, La chambre des demoiselles, sous le fort de Fréfossé, l'Aiguille Creuse. These were the 4 great formulas, the essential and general formulas which you had to know. By means of them, you turned en aval, that is to say, below or west of Treatise, entered the Chambre des Demoiselles, in all probability passed under Fort Fréfossé, and thus arrived at the needle. How? By means of the indications and measurements that constituted the 4th line. These were evidently the more special formulas to enable you to find the outlet through which you made your way, and the road that led to the needle. Beautrelet at once presumed, and his surmise was no more than the logical consequence of the document, that if there really was a direct communication between the land and the obelisk of the needle, the underground passage must start from the Chambre des Demoiselles, pass under Fort Fréfossé, descend perpendicularly the 300 feet of cliff, and, by means of a tunnel contrived under the rocks of the sea, end at the Hollow Needle. Which was the entrance to the underground passage? Did not the 2 letters D and F so plainly cut point to it and admit to it, with the aid, perhaps, of some ingenious piece of mechanism? The whole of the next morning Isidore strolled about Treatise and chatted with everybody he met in order to try and pick up useful information. At last, in the afternoon, he went up the cliff. Disguised as a sailor, he had made himself still younger, and, in a pair of trousers too short for him and a fishing jersey, he looked a mere scapegrace of 12 or 13. As soon as he entered the cave, he knelt down before the letters. Here a disappointment awaited him. It was no use his striking them, pushing them, manipulating them in every way. They refused to move. And it was not long, in fact, before he became aware that they were really unable to move, and that, therefore, they controlled no mechanism. And yet they must mean something. Inquiries which he had made in the village went to show that no one had ever been able to explain their existence, and that the Abbé Cochet, in his valuable little book on Treatise, had also tried in vain to solve this little puzzle. But Isidore knew what the learned Norman archaeologist did not know, namely, that the same two letters figured in the document on the line containing the indications. Was it a chance coincidence? Impossible. Well then, an idea suddenly occurred to him, an idea so reasonable, so simple that he did not doubt its correctness for a second. Were not that D and that F the initials of the two most important words in the document, the words that represented, together with the needle, the essential stations on the road to be followed, the Chambre des Demoiselles, and for Fréfossé, D for demoiselle, F for Fréfossé. The connection was too remarkable to be a mere accidental fact. In that case, the problem stood thus. The two letters DF represent the relation that exists between the Chambre des Demoiselles and for Fréfossé. The single letter D, which begins the line, represents the demoiselle, that is to say, the cave in which you have to begin by taking up your position, and the single letter F, placed in the middle of the line, represents Fréfossé, that is to say, the probable entrance to the underground passage. Between these various signs are two more. First, a sort of irregular rectangle, marked with a stripe in the left bottom corner, and, next, the figure 19, signs which obviously indicate to those inside the cave the means of penetrating beneath the fort. The shape of this rectangle puzzled Isidore. Was there around him, on the walls of the cave, or at any rate within reach of his eyes, an inscription, anything whatever, affecting a rectangular shape? He looked for a long time, and was on the point of abandoning that particular scent, when his eyes fell upon the little opening, pierced in the rock, that acted as a window to the chamber. Now the edges of this opening just formed a rectangle, corrugated, uneven, clumsy, but still a rectangle. And Beautrelet at once saw that by placing his 2 feet on the D and the F carved in the stone floor, and this explained the stroke that surmounted the 2 letters in the document, he found himself at the exact height of the window. He took up his position in this place and gazed out. The window looking landward, as we know, he saw first the path that connected the cave with the land, a path hung between 2 precipices. And next, he caught sight of the foot of the hillock on which the fort stood. To try and see the fort, Beautrelet leaned over to the left, and it was then that he understood the meaning of the curved stripe, the comma that marked the left bottom corner in the document. At the bottom, on the left-hand side of the window, a piece of flint projected, and the end of it was curved like a claw. It suggested a regular shooter's mark. And, when a man applied his eye to this mark, he saw cut out, on the slope of the mound facing him, a restricted surface of land occupied almost entirely by an old brick wall, a remnant of the original Fort Fréfossé, or of the old Roman oppidum built on this spot. Beautrelet ran to this piece of wall, which was, perhaps, 10 yards long. It was covered with grass and plants. There was no indication of any kind visible. And yet that figure 19? He returned to the cave, took from his pocket a ball of string and a tape measure, tied the string to the flint corner, fastened a pebble at the 19th meter, and flung it toward the land side. The pebble at most reached the end of the path. Idiot that I am, thought Beautrelet, who reckoned by meters in those days. The figure 19 means 19 fathoms or nothing. Having made the calculation, he ran out the twine, made a knot, and felt about on the piece of wall for the exact and necessarily one point at which the knot, formed at 37 meters from the window of the demoiselle, should touch the Fréfossé wall. In a few moments, the point of contact was established. With his free hand, he moved aside the leaves of mullein that had grown in the interstices. A cry escaped him. The knot, which he held pressed down with his forefinger, was in the center of a little cross carved in relief on a brick. And the sign that followed on the figure 19 in the document was a cross. It needed all his willpower to control the excitement with which he was overcome. Hurriedly, with convulsive fingers, he clutched the cross and, pressing upon it, turned it as he would have turned the spokes of a wheel. The brick heaved. He redoubled his effort. It moved no further. Then, without turning, he pressed harder. He at once felt the brick give way. And, suddenly, there was the click of a bolt that is released. the sound of a lock opening, and, on the right of the brick, to the width of about a yard, the wall swung round on a pivot and revealed the orifice of an underground passage. Like a madman, Beautrelet seized the iron door in which the bricks were sealed, pulled it back violently, and closed it. Astonishment, delight, the fear of being surprised convulsed his face so as to render it unrecognizable. He beheld the awful vision of all that had happened there, in front of that door, during 20 centuries, of all those people, initiated into the great secret, who had penetrated through that issue: Celts, Gauls, Romans, Normans, Englishmen, Frenchmen, barons, dukes, kings, and after all of them Arsène Lupin, and after Lupin himself, Beautrelet. He felt that his brain was slipping away from him. His eyelids fluttered. He fell fainting and rolled to the bottom of the slope, to the very edge of the precipice. His task was done, at least the task which he was able to accomplish alone, with his unaided resources. That evening, he wrote a long letter to the chief of the detective service, giving a faithful account of the results of his investigations and revealing the secret of the Hollow Needle. He asked for assistance to complete his work and gave his address. While waiting for the reply, he spent 2 consecutive nights in the Chambre des Demoiselles. He spent them overcome with fear, his nerves shaken with a terror which was increased by the sounds of the night. At every moment, he thought he saw shadows approach in his direction. People knew of his presence in the cave. They were coming. They were murdering him. His eyes, however, staring madly before them, sustained by all the power of his will, clung to the piece of wall. On the first night, nothing stirred, but on the second, by the light of the stars and a slender crescent moon, he saw the door open and figures emerge from the darkness. He counted 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. It seemed to him that those 5 men were carrying fairly large loads. He followed them for a little way. They cut straight across the fields to the Havre road, and he heard the sound of a motor car driving away. He retraced his steps, skirting a big farm. But at the turn of the road that ran beside it, he had only just time to scramble up a slope and hide behind some trees. More men passed, 4, 5 men, all carrying packages. And 2 minutes later, another motor snorted. This time, he had not the strength to return to his post, and he went back to bed. When he woke and had finished dressing, the hotel waiter brought him a letter. He opened it. It contained Ganimard's card. "At last!" cried Beautrelet, who, after so hard a campaign, was really feeling the need of a comrade in arms. He ran downstairs with outstretched hands. Ganimard took them, looked at him for a moment, and said, "You're a fine fellow, my lad." "Pooh," he said. "Luck has served me." "There's no such thing as luck with him," declared the inspector, who always spoke of Lupin in a solemn tone and without mentioning his name. He sat down. "So we've got him." "Just as we've had him 20 times over," said Beautrelet, laughing. "Yes, but today, of course, the case is different. We know his retreat, his stronghold, which means, when all is said, that Lupin is Lupin. He can escape. The Étretat needle cannot." "Why do you suppose that he will escape?" asked Ganimard anxiously. "Why do you suppose that he requires to escape?" replied Beautrelet. "There is nothing to prove that he is in the needle at present. Last night, 11 of his men left it. He may be one of the 11. Ganimard reflected. "You are right. The great thing is the Hollow Needle. For the rest, let us hope that chance will favor us. And now, let us talk." He resumed his serious voice, his self-important air, and said, "My dear Beautrelet, I have orders to recommend you to observe the most absolute discretion in regard to this matter." "Orders from whom?" asked Beautrelet, jestingly. "The prefect of police?" "Higher than that." "The prime minister?" "Higher." "Whew!" Ganimard lowered his voice. Beautrelet? I was at the Élysée last night. They look upon this matter as a state secret of the utmost gravity. There are serious reasons for concealing the existence of this citadel, reasons of military strategy in particular. It might become a revictualling center, a magazine for new explosives, for lately invented projectiles, for anything of that sort. The secret arsenal of France, in fact. But how can they hope to keep a secret like this? In the old days, one man alone held it, the king. Today, already, there are a good few of us who know it, without counting Lupin's gang. Still, if we gained only 10 years, only 5 years silence, those 5 years may be the saving of us. But in order to capture this citadel, this future arsenal, it will have to be attacked. Lupin must be dislodged. And all this cannot be done without noise. Of course, people will guess something, but they won't know. Besides, we can but try. All right. What's your plan? Here it is, in 2 words. To begin with, you are not Isidore Beautrelet, and there's no question of Arsène Lupin either. You are, and you remain, a small boy of Étretat, who, while strolling about the place, caught some fellows coming out of an underground passage. This makes you suspect the existence of a flight of steps which cuts through the cliff from top to bottom. Yes, there are several of those flights of steps along the coast. For instance, to the right of Étretat, opposite Bénouville, they showed me the Devil's Staircase, which every bather knows, and I say nothing of the 3 or 4 tunnels used by the fishermen. So you will guide me and 1/2 of my men. I shall enter alone, or accompanied. That remains to be seen. This much is certain, that the attack must be delivered that way. If Lupin is not in the Needle, we shall fix up a trap in which he will be caught sooner or later. If he is there, he will escape from the Needle by the other side, the side overlooking the sea. In that case, he will at once be arrested by the other half of my men. Yes, but if, as I presume, you choose a moment when the sea is at low ebb, leaving the base of the Needle uncovered, the chase will be public, because it will take place before all the men and women fishing for mussels, shrimps, and shellfish who swarm on the rocks round about. That is why I just mean to select the time when the sea is full. In that case, he will make off in a boat. Ah, but I shall have a dozen fishing smacks, each of which will be commanded by one of my men, and we shall collar him. If he doesn't slip through your dozen smacks, like a fish through the meshes. All right, then I'll sink him. The devil you will. Shall you have guns? Why, of course. There's a torpedo boat at the Havre at this moment. A telegram from me will bring her to the Needle at the appointed hour. How proud Lupin will be! A torpedo boat! Well, Monsieur Ganimard, I see that you have provided for everything. We have only to go ahead. When do we deliver the assault? Tomorrow. At night? No, by daylight, at the flood tide, as the clock strikes 10 in the morning. Capital. Under his show of gaiety, Beautrelet concealed a real anguish of mind. He did not sleep until the morning, but lay pondering over the most impracticable schemes, one after the other. Ganimard had left him in order to go to Yport, 6 or 7 miles from Étretat, where, for prudence's sake, he had told his men to meet him, and where he chartered 12 fishing smacks, with the ostensible object of taking soundings along the coast. At 9:45, escorted by a body of 12 stalwart men, he met Isidore at the foot of the road that goes up the cliff. At 10 o'clock exactly, they reached the skirt of wall. It was the decisive moment. At 10 o'clock exactly. "Why, what's the matter with you, Beautrelet?" jeered Ganimard. "You're quite green in the face." "It's as well you can't see yourself, Ganimard," the boy retorted. "One would think your last hour had come." They both had to sit down, and Ganimard swallowed a few mouthfuls of rum. "It's not funk," he said, "but by Jove, This is an exciting business. Each time that I'm on the point of catching him, it takes me like that in the pit of the stomach. A dram of rum? No. And if you drop behind, that will mean that I'm dead. Brr, however, we'll see. And now, open, Sesame! No danger of our being observed, I suppose? No. The needle is not so high as the cliff. And besides, there's a bend in the ground where we are. Beautrelet went to the wall and pressed upon the brick. The bolt was released, and the underground passage came in sight. By the gleam of the lanterns which they lit, they saw that it was cut in the shape of a vault, and that both the vaulting and the floor itself were entirely covered with bricks. They walked for a few seconds, and, suddenly, a staircase appeared. Beautrelet counted 45 brick steps, which the slow action of many footsteps had worn away in the middle. "Blow!" said Ganimard, holding his head and stopping suddenly as though he had knocked against something. "What is it?" "A door." "Bother!" muttered Beautrelet, looking at it. "And not an easy one to break down either. It's just a solid block of iron." "We are done," said Ganimard. "There's not even a lock to it." "Exactly. That's what gives me hope." "Why?" "A door is made to open. And as this one has no lock, that means that there is a secret way of opening it. And as we don't know the secret, I shall know it in a minute." "How?" "By means of the document. The fourth line has no other object but to solve each difficulty as and when it crops up. And the solution is comparatively easy because it's not written with a view to throwing searchers off the scent, but to assisting them." "Comparatively easy? I don't agree with you," cried Ganimard, who had unfolded the document. "The number 44 and a triangle with a dot in it. That doesn't tell us much." Yes, it does. Look at the door. You see it's strengthened at each corner with a triangular slab of iron, and the slabs are fixed with big nails. Take the left-hand bottom slab and work the nail in the corner. I'll lay 10 to 1 we've hit the mark." "You've lost your bet," said Ganimard after trying. "Then the figure 44 must mean—" In a low voice, reflecting as he spoke, Beautrelet continued, "Let me see. Ganimard and I are both standing on the bottom step of the staircase. There are 45. Why 45 when the figure in the document is 44? A coincidence? No. In all this business there is no such thing as a coincidence, at least not an involuntary one. Ganimard, be so good as to move 1 step higher up. That's it, don't leave this 44th step. And now I will work the iron nail. And the trick's done, or I'll eat my boots." The heavy door turned on its hinges. A fairly spacious cavern appeared before their eyes. "We must be exactly under Fort Fossé," said Beautrelet. "We have passed through the different earthy layers by now. There will be no more brick. We are in the heart of the solid limestone." The room was dimly lit by a shaft of daylight that came from the other end. Going up to it, they saw that it was a fissure in the cliff, contrived in a projecting wall and forming a sort of observatory. In front of them, at a distance of 50 yards, the impressive mass of the Needle loomed from the waves. On the right, quite close, was the arched buttress of the Porte d'Aval, and, on the left, very far away, closing the graceful curve of a large inlet, another rocky gateway, more imposing still, was cut out of the cliff, the Maniport, which was so wide and tall that a 3-master could have passed through it with all sail set. Behind and everywhere the sea. "I don't see our little fleet," said Beautrelet. "I know," said Ganimard. "The Porte d'Aval hides the whole of the coast of Étretat and Yport. But look, over there in the offing, that black line, level with the water." "Well, that's our fleet of war, torpedo boat number 25. With her there, Lupin is welcome to break loose, if he wants to study the landscape at the bottom of the sea." A baluster marked the entrance to the staircase, near the fissure. They started on their way down. From time to time a little window pierced the wall of the cliff, and each time they caught sight of the Needle, whose mass seemed to them to grow more and more colossal. A little before reaching high water level, the windows ceased, and all was dark. Isidore counted the steps aloud. At the 358, they emerged into a wider passage, which was barred by another iron door strengthened with slabs and nails. "We know all about this," said Beautrelet. "The document gives us 357 and a triangle dotted on the right. We have only to repeat the performance." The second door obeyed like the first. A very long tunnel appeared, lit up at intervals by the gleam of a lantern swung from the vault. The walls oozed moisture, and drops of water fell to the ground, so that, to make walking easier, a regular pavement of planks had been laid from end to end. "We are passing under the sea," said Beautrelet. "Are you coming, Ganimard?" Without replying, the inspector ventured into the tunnel, followed the wooden footplank, and stopped before a lantern, which he took down. "The utensils may date back to the Middle Ages, but the lighting is modern," he said. "Our friends use incandescent mantles." He continued his way. The tunnel ended in another and a larger cave, with, on the opposite side, the first steps of a staircase that led upward. "It's the ascent of the Needle beginning," said Ganimard. "This is more serious." But one of his men called him. "There's another flight here, sir, on the left," and, immediately afterward, they discovered a third on the right. "The deuce!" muttered the inspector. "This complicates matters. If we go by this way, they'll make tracks by that." "Shall we separate?" asked Beautrelet. No, that would mean weakening ourselves. It would be better for one of us to go ahead and scout." "I will, if you like." "Very well, Beautrelet, you go. I will remain with my men. Then there will be no fear of anything. There may be other roads through the cliff than that by which we came, and several roads also through the Needle. But it is certain that, between the cliff and the Needle, there is no communication except the tunnel. Therefore they must pass through this cave, and so I shall stay here till you come back. Go ahead, Beautrelet, and be prudent. At the least alarm, scoot back again." Isidore disappeared briskly up the middle staircase. At the 30th step, a door, an ordinary wooden door, stopped him. He seized the handle, turned it. The door was not locked. He entered a room that seemed to him very low, owing to its immense size. Lit by powerful lamps and supported by squat pillars, with long vistas showing between them, it had nearly the same dimensions as the Needle itself. It was crammed with packing cases and miscellaneous objects, pieces of furniture, oak settees, chests, credence tables, strong boxes, a whole confused heap of the kind which one sees in the basement of an old curiosity shop. On his right and left, Beautrelet perceived the wells of two staircases, the same, no doubt, that started from the cave below. He could easily have gone down, therefore, and told Ganimard. But a new flight of stairs led upward in front of him, and he had the curiosity to pursue his investigations alone. 30 more steps, a door, and then a room, not quite so large as the last, Beautrelet thought, and again, opposite him, an ascending flight of stairs. 30 steps more, a door, a smaller room. Beautrelet grasped the plan of the works executed inside the Needle. It was a series or rooms placed one above the other, and, therefore, gradually decreasing in size. They all served as storerooms. In the fourth, there was no lamp. A little light filtered in through clefts in the walls, and Beautrelet saw the sea some 30 feet below him. At that moment he felt himself so far from Ganimard that a certain anguish began to take hold of him, and he had to master his nerves lest he should take to his heels. No danger threatened him, however, and the silence around him was even so great that he asked himself whether the whole Needle had not been abandoned by Lupin and his confederates. "I shall not go beyond the next floor," he said to himself. 30 stairs again, and a door. This door was lighter in construction, and modern in appearance. He pushed it open gently, quite prepared for flight. There was no one there. But the room differed from the others in its purpose. There were hangings on the walls, rugs on the floor. 2 magnificent sideboards, laden with gold and silver plate, stood facing each other. The little windows contrived in the deep, narrow cleft were furnished with glass panes. In the middle of the room was a richly decked table with a lace-edged cloth, dishes of fruits and cakes, champagne in decanters and flowers, heaps of flowers. 3 places were laid around the table. Beautrelet walked up. On the napkins were cards with the names of the party. He read first, Arsène Lupin, Madame Arsène Lupin. He took up the 3rd card and started back with surprise. It bore his own name. Isidore Beautrelet. Chapter 10. The Treasures of the Kings of France. A curtain was drawn back. "Good morning, my dear Beautrelet. You're a little late. Lunch was fixed for 12. However, it's only a few minutes, but what's the matter? Don't you know me? Have I changed so much?" In the course of his fight with Lupin, Beautrelet had met with many surprises, and he was still prepared at the moment of the final catastrophe to experience any number of further emotions. But the shock which he received this time was utterly unexpected. It was not astonishment, but stupefaction, terror. The man who stood before him, the man whom the brutal force of events compelled him to look upon as Arsène Lupin, was Valmeras. Valmeras, the owner of the Château de Leguy. Valmeras, the very man to whom he had applied for assistance against Arsène Lupin. Valmeras, his companion on the expedition to Crozant. Valmeras, the plucky friend who had made Raymond's escape possible by felling one of Lupin's accomplices, or pretending to fell him, in the dusk of the great hall. And Valmeras was Lupin. You, so it's you," he stammered. "Why not?" exclaimed Lupin. "Did you think that you knew me for good and all because you had seen me in the guise of a clergyman, or under the features of M. Massaban? Alas! When a man selects the position in society which I occupy, he must needs make use of his little social gifts. If Lupin were not able to change himself at will into a minister of the Church of England or a member of the Academy of Inscriptions and Belles Lettres, it would be a bad lookout for Lupin. Now Lupin, the real Lupin, is here before you, Beautrelet. Take a good look at him. But then, if it's you, then, Mademoiselle." "Yes, Beautrelet, as you say." He again drew back the hanging, beckoned, and announced, "Madame Arsène Lupin." "Ah," murmured the lad, confounded in spite of everything. "Mademoiselle de Saint-Véran." "No, no," protested Lupin. "Madame Arsène Lupin, or rather, if you prefer, Madame. Louis Valmeras, my wedded wife, married to me in accordance with the strictest forms of law, and all thanks to you, my dear Beautrelet." He held out his hand to him. "All my acknowledgments, and no ill will on your side, I trust?" Strange to say, Beautrelet felt no ill will at all, no sense of humiliation, no bitterness. He realized so strongly the immense superiority of his adversary that he did not blush at being beaten by him. He pressed the offered hand. "Luncheon is served, ma'am." A butler had placed a tray of dishes on the table. "You must excuse us, Beautrelet. My chef is away and we can only give you a cold lunch." Beautrelet felt very little inclined to eat. He sat down, however, and was enormously interested in Lupin's attitude. How much exactly did he know? Was he aware of the danger he was running? Was he ignorant of the presence of Ganimard and his men? And Lupin continued, "Yes, thanks to you, my dear friend. Certainly, Raymond and I loved each other from the first. Just so. My boy, Raymond's abduction, her imprisonment, were mere humbug. We loved each other, but neither she nor I, when we were free to love, would allow a casual bond at the mercy of chance to be formed between us. The position, therefore, was hopeless for Lupin. Fortunately, it ceased to be so if I resumed my identity as the Louis Valmeras that I had been from a child. It was then that I conceived the idea, as you refused to relinquish your quest and had found the Château de Leguy, of profiting by your obstinacy. And my silliness. Pooh! Anyone would have been caught as you were. So you were really able to succeed because I screened you and assisted you? Of course. How could anyone suspect Valmeras of being Lupin, when Valmeras was Beautrelet's friend, And after Valmeras had snatched from Lupin's clutches the girl whom Lupin loved. And how charming it was! Such delightful memories. The expedition to Crozant, the bouquets we found, my pretended love letter to Raymond, and later, the precautions which I, Valmeras, had to take against myself, Lupin, before my marriage, and the night of your great banquet, Beautrelet, when you fainted in my arms. Oh, what memories! There was a pause. Beautrelet watched Raymond. She had listened to Lupin without saying a word, and looked at him with eyes in which he read love, passion, and something else besides, something which the lad could not define, a sort of anxious embarrassment and a vague sadness. But Lupin turned his eyes upon her, and she gave him an affectionate smile. Their hands met over the table. "What do you say to the way I have arranged my little home, Beautrelet?" cried Lupin. "There's a style about it, isn't there? I don't pretend that it's as comfortable as it might be. And yet some have been quite satisfied with it, and not the least of mankind either. Look at the list of distinguished people who have owned the needle in their time, and who thought it an honor to leave a mark of their sojourn." On the walls, one below the other, were carved the following names: Julius Caesar, Charlemagne Rollo, William the Conqueror, Richard Ceur de Lion, Louis XI, Francis I, Henry IV, Louis XIV, Arsène Lupin. "Whose name will figure after ours?" he continued. "Alas, the list is closed. From Caesar to Lupin, and there it ends. Soon the nameless mob will come to visit the strange citadel. And to think that, but for Lupin, all this would have remained forever unknown to men. Ah, Beautrelet, what a feeling of pride was mine on the day when I first set foot on this abandoned soil, to have found the lost secret and become its master, its sole master, to inherit such an inheritance, to live in the needle, after all those kings." He was interrupted by a gesture of his wife's. She seemed greatly agitated. "There is a noise," she said, "underneath us. You can hear it." "It's the lapping of the water," said Lupin. "No, indeed it's not. I know the sound of the waves. This is something different." "What would you have it be, darling?" said Lupin, smiling. "I invited no one to lunch except Beautrelet. And," addressing the servant, "Charolais, did you lock the staircase doors behind the gentleman?" "Yes, sir, and fasten the bolts." Lupin rose. "Come, Raymond, don't shake like that. Why, you're quite pale." He spoke a few words to her in an undertone, as also to the servant, drew back the curtain, and sent them both out of the room. The noise below grew more distinct. It was a series of dull blows, repeated at intervals. Beautrelet thought, "Ganimard has lost patience and is breaking down the doors." Lupin resumed the thread of his conversation, speaking very calmly and as though he had really not heard. "By Jove, the needle was badly damaged when I succeeded in discovering it. One could see that no one had possessed the secret for more than a century, since Louis XVI and the Revolution. The tunnel was threatening to fall in. The stairs were in a shocking state. The water was trickling in from the sea. I had to prop up and strengthen and rebuild the whole thing." Beautrelet could not help asking, "When you arrived, was it empty?" "Very nearly. The kings did not use the needle, as I have done, as a warehouse." "As a place of refuge, then?" "Yes, no doubt, in times of invasion and during the civil wars, but its real destination was to be, how shall I put it, the strong room or the bank of the kings of France." The sound of blows increased, more distinctly now. Ganimard must have broken down the first door and was attacking the second. There was a short silence, and then more blows, nearer still. It was the third door. Two remained. Through one of the windows, Beautrelet saw a number of fishing smacks sailing round the needle, and, not far away, floating on the waters like a great black fish, the torpedo boat. "What a row!" exclaimed Lupin. "One can't hear oneself speak. Let's go upstairs, shall we?" It may interest you to look over the needle." They climbed to the floor above, which was protected, like the others, by a door which Lupin locked behind him. "My picture gallery," he said. The walls were covered with canvases, on which Beautrelet recognized the most famous signatures. There were Raphael's Madonna of the Agnus Dei, Andrea del Sarto's portrait of Lucrezia Fede, Titian's Salome, Botticelli's Madonna and Angels, and numbers of Tintorettos, Carpaccios, Rembrandts, Velázquez. "What fine copies," said Beautrelet approvingly. Lupin looked at him with an air of stupefaction. "What? Copies? You must be mad!" "The copies are in Madrid, my dear fellow, in Florence, Venice, Munich, Amsterdam." "Then these are the original pictures, my lad, patiently collected in all the museums of Europe, where I have replaced them, like an honest man, with first-rate copies. But some day or other, the fraud will be discovered. Well, they will find my signature on each canvas at the back, and they will know that it was I who have endowed my country with the original masterpieces. After all, I have only done what Napoleon did in Italy. Oh, look, Beautrelet, here are Monsieur de Gesvres' 4 Rubenses." The knocking continued within the hollow of the needle without ceasing. "I can't stand this," said Lupin. "Let's go higher." A fresh staircase, a fresh door. "The tapestry room," Lupin announced. The tapestries were not hung on the walls, but rolled, tied up with cord, ticketed. And, in addition, there were parcels of old fabrics which Lupin unfolded, wonderful brocades, admirable velvets, soft faded silks, church vestments woven with silver and gold. They went higher still, and Beautrelet saw the room containing the clocks and other timepieces, the book room. Oh, the splendid bindings, the precious, undiscoverable volumes, the unique copies stolen from the great public libraries, and each time the circumference of the room grew smaller, and each time now the sound of knocking was more distant. Ganimard was losing ground. "This is the last room," said Lupin, "the treasury." This one was quite different. It was round also, but very high and conical in shape. It occupied the top of the edifice, and its floor must have been 15 or 20 yards below the extreme point of the needle. On the cliffside there was no window, but on the side of the sea, whence there were no indiscreet eyes to fear, 2 glazed openings admitted plenty of light. The ground was covered with a parqueted flooring of rare wood, forming concentric patterns. Against the wall stood glass cases and a few pictures. "The pearls of my collection," said Lupin. "All that you have seen so far is for sale. Things come and things go, that's business. But here, in this sanctuary, everything is sacred. There is nothing here but choice, essential pieces, the best of the best, priceless things. Look at these jewels, Beautrelet, Chaldean amulets, Egyptian necklaces, Celtic bracelets, Arab chains. Look at these statuettes, Beautrelet, at this Greek Venus, this Corinthian Apollo. Look at these Tanagras, Beautrelet, all the real Tanagras are here. Outside this glass case, there is not a single genuine Tanagra statuette in the whole wide world." What a delicious thing to be able to say. "Beautrelet, do you remember Thomas and his gang of church pillagers in the south? Agents of mine, by the way? Well, here is the Ambazac reliquary, the real one, Beautrelet. Do you remember the Louvre scandal? The tiara, which was admitted to be false, invented and manufactured by a modern artist? Here is the tiara of Saida Farnese, the real one, Beautrelet. Look, Beautrelet, look with all your eyes. Here is the marvel of marvels, the supreme masterpiece, the work of no mortal brain. Here is Leonardo's Gioconda, the real one. Kneel, Beautrelet, kneel. All womankind stands before you in this picture." There was a long silence between them. Below, the sound of blows drew nearer. 2 or 3 doors, no more, separated them from Ganimard. In the offing they saw the black back of the torpedo boat, and the fishing smacks cruising to and fro. The boy asked, "And the treasure?" "Ah, my little man, that's what interests you most. None of those masterpieces of human art can compete with the contemplation of the treasure as a matter of curiosity, eh? And the whole crowd will be like you. Come, you shall be satisfied." He stamped his foot and, in so doing, made one of the discs composing the floor pattern turn right over. Then, lifting it as though it were the lid of a box, he uncovered a sort of large round bowl, dug in the thickness of the rock. It was empty. A little farther, he went through the same performance. Another large bowl appeared. It was also empty. He did this 3 times over again. The 3 other bowls were empty. Grinned Lupin. What a disappointment! Under Louis XI, under Henry IV, under Richelieu, the 5 bowls were full. But think of Louis XIV, the folly of Versailles, the wars, the great disasters of the reign, and think of Louis XV, the spendthrift king, with his Pompadour and his Du Barry. How they must have drawn on the treasure in those days. With what thieving claws they must have scratched at the stone. You see, there's nothing left. He stopped. Yes, Beautrelet, there is something. The 6th hiding place. This one was intangible. Not one of them dared touch it. It was the very last resource, the nest egg, the something put by for a rainy day. Look, Beautrelet! He stooped and lifted up the lid. An iron box filled the bowl. Lupin took from his pocket a key with a complicated bit and wards and opened the box. A dazzling sight presented itself. Every sort of precious stone sparkled there. Every color gleamed, the blue of the sapphires, the red of the rubies, the green of the emeralds, the yellow of the topazes. Look, look, little Beautrelet. They have squandered all the cash, all the gold, all the silver, all the crown pieces, and all the ducats and all the doubloons, but the chest with the jewels has remained intact. Look at the settings. They belong to every period, to every century, to every country. The dowries of the queens are here. Each brought her share. Margaret of Scotland and Charlotte of Savoy, Duchesses of Austria, Eleanor, Elizabeth, Marie-Thérèse, Mary of England, and Catherine de' Medici, and all the arch, Marie Antoinette. Look at those pearls, Beautrelet, and those diamonds. Look at the size of the diamonds. Not one of them but is worthy of an empress. The Pitt diamond is no finer. He rose to his feet and held up his hand as one taking an oath. Beautrelet, you shall tell the world that Lupin has not taken a single one of the stones that were in the royal chest, not a single one. I swear it on my honor. I had no right to. They are the fortune of France. Below them, Ganimard was making all speed. It was easy to judge by the reverberation of the blows that his men were attacking the last door but one, the door that gave access to the knick-knack room. "Let us leave the chest open," said Lupin, "and all the cavities too, all those little empty graves." He went round the room, examined some of the glass cases, gazed at some of the pictures, and as he walked, said pensively, "How sad it is to leave all this! What a wrench! The happiest hours of my life have been spent here, alone, in the presence of these objects which I loved, and my eyes will never behold them again, and my hands will never touch them again." His drawn face bore such an expression of lassitude upon it that Beautrelet felt a vague sort of pity for him. Sorrow in that man must assume larger proportions than in another, even as joy did, or pride, or humiliation. He was now standing by the window and with his finger pointing to the horizon said, "What is sadder still is that I must abandon that, all that. How beautiful it is! The boundless sea, the sky, on either side, the cliffs of Étretat with their 3 natural archways, the Porte d'Armont, the Porte d'Aval, the Maniport. So many triumphal arches for the master, and the master was I. I was the king of the story, the king of fairyland, the king of the Hollow Needle. A strange and supernatural kingdom. From Caesar to Lupin, what a destiny!" He burst out laughing. "King of fairyland! Why not say king of Yvetot at once? What nonsense! King of the world, yes, that's more like it. From this topmost point of the needle, I ruled the globe. I held it in my claws like a prey. Lift the tiara of Saint-Farn's Beautrelet. You see those two telephones? The one on the right communicates with Paris, a private line. The one on the left with London, a private line. Through London, I am in touch with America, Asia, Australia, South Africa. In all those continents I have my offices, my agents, my jackals, my scouts. I drive an international trade. I hold the great market in art and antiquities, the World's Fair. Ah, Beautrelet, there are moments when my power turns my head. I feel intoxicated with strength and authority. The door gave way below. They heard Ganimard and his men running about and searching. After a moment, Lupin continued in a low voice. And now it's over. A little girl crossed my path, a girl with soft hair and wistful eyes, and an honest soul. And it's over. I myself am demolishing the mighty edifice. All the rest seems absurd and childish to me. Nothing counts but her hair, and her wistful eyes, and her honest little soul. The men came up the staircase. A blow shook the door, the last door. Lupin seized the boy sharply by the arm. Do you understand, Beautrelet, why I let you have things your own way when I could have crushed you time after time weeks ago? Do you understand how you succeeded in getting as far as this? Do you understand that I had given each of my men his share of the plunder when you met them the other night on the cliff? You do understand, don't you? The Hollow Needle is the great adventure. As long as it belongs to me, I remain the great adventurer. Once the needle is recaptured, it means that the past and I are parted, and that the future begins, a future of peace and happiness, in which I shall have no occasion to blush when Raymond's eyes are turned upon me, a future. He turned furiously toward the door. Stop that noise, Ganimard, will you? I haven't finished my speech. The blows came faster. It was like the sound of a beam that was being hurled against the door. Beautrelet, mad with curiosity, stood in front of Lupin and awaited events, without understanding what Lupin was doing or contemplating. To give up the needle was all very well, but why was he giving up himself? What was his plan? Did he hope to escape from Ganimard? And, on the other hand, where was Raymond? Lupin, meantime, was murmuring dreamily, an honest man. Arsène Lupin, an honest man. No more robbery, leading the life of everybody else. And why not? There is no reason why I should not meet with the same success. But do stop that now, Ganimard. Don't you know, you ass, that I'm uttering historic words, and that Beautrelet is taking them in for the benefit of posterity? He laughed. I am wasting my time. Ganimard will never grasp the use of my historic words. He took a piece of red chalk, put a pair of steps to the wall, and wrote, in large letters, Arsène Lupin gives and bequeaths to France all the treasures contained in the Hollow Needle, on the sole condition that these treasures be housed at the Musée du Louvre in rooms which shall be known as the Arsène Lupin rooms. Now, he said, my conscience is at ease. France and I are quits. The attackers were striking with all their might. One of the panels burst in two. A hand was put through and fumbled for the lock. Thunder, said Lupin. That idiot of a Ganimard is capable of effecting his purpose for once in his life. He rushed to the lock and removed the key. Sold, old chap. The door's tough. I have plenty of time. Beautrelet, I must say goodbye. And thank you, for really you could have complicated the attack. But you're so tactful. While speaking, he moved toward a large triptych by van der Weyden, representing the wise men of the East. He shut the right-hand panel and, in so doing, exposed a little door concealed behind it and seized the handle. Good luck to your hunting, Ganimard, and kind regards at home. A pistol shot resounded. Lupin jumped back. Ah, you rascal, full in the heart. Have you been taking lessons? You've done for the wise man, full in the heart, smashed to smithereens, like a pipe at the fair. Lupin! Surrender! Roared Ganimard, with his eyes glittering and his revolver showing through the broken panel of the door. Surrender, I say. Did the old guard surrender? If you stir a limb, I'll blow your brains out. "Nonsense! You can't get me here!" As a matter of fact, Lupin had moved away. And, though Ganimard was able to fire straight in front of him through the breach in the door, he could not fire, still less take aim on the side where Lupin stood. Lupin's position was a terrible one for all that, because the outlet on which he was relying, the little door behind the triptych, opened right in front of Ganimard. To try to escape meant to expose himself to the detective's fire, and there were 5 bullets left in the revolver. "By Jove," he said, laughing. "There's a slump in my shares this afternoon. You've done a nice thing. Lupin, old fellow, you wanted a last sensation, and you've gone a bit too far. You shouldn't have talked so much." He flattened himself against the wall. A further portion of the panel had given way under the men's pressure, and Ganimard was less hampered in his movements. 3 yards, no more, separated the two antagonists, but Lupin was protected by a glass case with a gilt wood framework. "Why don't you help Beautrelet?" cried the old detective, gnashing his teeth with rage. "Why don't you shoot him, instead of staring at him like that?" Isidore, in fact, had not budged, had remained, till that moment, an eager but passive spectator. He would have liked to fling himself into the contest with all his strength and to bring down the prey which he held at his mercy. He was prevented by some inexplicable sentiment. But Ganimard's appeal for assistance shook him. His hand closed on the butt of his revolver. "If I take part in it," he thought, "Lupin is lost. And I have the right. It's my duty." Their eyes met. Lupin's were calm, watchful, almost inquisitive, as though, in the awful danger that threatened him, he were interested only in the moral problem that held the young man in its clutches. Would Isidore decide to give the finishing stroke to the defeated enemy? The door cracked from top to bottom. "Help, Beautrelet! We've got him!" Ganimard bellowed. Isidore raised his revolver. What happened was so quick that he knew of it, so to speak, only by the result. He saw Lupin bob down and run along the wall, skimming the door right under the weapon which Ganimard was vainly brandishing, and he felt himself suddenly flung to the ground, picked up the next moment, and lifted by an invincible force. Lupin held him in the air, like a living shield, behind which he hid himself. 10 to 1 that I escape, Ganimard! Lupin, you see, has never quite exhausted his resources. He had taken a couple of brisk steps backward to the triptych. Holding Beautrelet with one hand flat against his chest, with the other he cleared the passage and closed the little door behind them. A steep staircase appeared before their eyes. "Come along," said Lupin, pushing Beautrelet before him. "The land forces are beaten. Let us turn our attention to the French fleet. After Waterloo, Trafalgar. You're having some fun for your money, eh, my lad? Oh, how good! Listen to them knocking at the triptych now. It's too late, my children, but hurry along, Beautrelet." The staircase, dug out in the wall of the Needle, dug in its very crust, turned round and round the pyramid, encircling it like the spiral of a toboggan slide. Each hurrying the other, they clattered down the treads, taking 2 or 3 at a bound. Here and there a ray of light trickled through a fissure, and Beautrelet carried away the vision of the fishing smacks hovering a few dozen fathoms off, and of the black torpedo boat. They went down and down, Isidore in silence, Lupin still bubbling over with merriment. I should like to know what Ganimard is doing. Is he tumbling down the other staircases to bar the entrance to the tunnel against me? No, he's not such a fool as that. He must have left 4 men there, and 4 men are sufficient. He stopped. Listen, they're shouting up above. That's it, they've opened the window and are calling to their fleet. Why, look, the men are busy on board the smacks. They're exchanging signals. The torpedo boat is moving. Dear old torpedo boat, I know you. You're from the Havre. Guns crews to the guns. Hello, there's the commander. How are you, Duguay-Trouin? He put his arm through a cleft and waved his handkerchief. Then he continued his way downstairs. The enemy's fleet have set all sail, he said. We shall be boarded before we know where we are. Heavens, what fun! They heard the sound of voices below them. They were just then approaching the level of the sea, and they emerged, almost at once, into a large cave into which 2 lanterns were moving about in the dark. A woman's figure appeared and threw itself on Lupin's neck. "Quick, quick! I was so nervous about you. What have you been doing? But you're not alone." Lupin reassured her. "It's our friend Beautrelet. Just think, Beautrelet had the tact, but I'll talk about that later. There's no time now. Charolais, are you there? That's right. And the boat?" "The boat's ready, sir," Charolais replied. "Fire away," said Lupin. In a moment, the noise of a motor crackled, and Beautrelet, whose eyes were gradually becoming used to the gloom, ended by perceiving that they were on a sort of quay, at the edge of the water, and that a boat was floating before them. "A motorboat," said Lupin, completing Beautrelet's observations. "This knocks you all of a heap, eh, Isidore, old chap? You don't understand. Still, you have only to think. As the water before your eyes is no other than the water of the sea, which filters into this excavation each high tide, the result is that I have a safe little private roadstead all to myself." "But it's closed," Beautrelet protested. "No one can get in or out." "Yes, I can," said Lupin, "and I'm going to prove it to you." He began by handing Raymond in. Then he came back to fetch Beautrelet. The lad hesitated. "Are you afraid?" asked Lupin. "What of?" "Of being sunk by the torpedo boat." "No." "Then you're considering whether it's not your duty to stay with Ganimard? Law and order, society and morality, instead of going off with Lupin. Shame, infamy, and disgrace." "Exactly. Unfortunately, my boy, you have no choice. For the moment, they must believe the 2 of us dead, and leave me the peace to which a prospective honest man is entitled. Later on, when I have given you your liberty, you can talk as much as you please. I shall have nothing more to fear." By the way in which Lupin clutched his arm, Beautrelet felt that all resistance was useless. Besides, why resist? Had he not discovered and handed over the Hollow Needle? What did he care about the rest? Had he not the right to humor the irresistible sympathy with which, in spite of everything, this man inspired him? The feeling was so clear in him that he was half inclined to say to Lupin, "Look here, you're running a more serious danger. Holmlock Shears is on your track." "Come along," said Lupin, before Isidore had made up his mind to speak. He obeyed and let Lupin lead him to the boat, the shape of which struck him as peculiar, and its appearance quite unexpected. Once on deck, they went down a little steep staircase, or rather a ladder hooked onto a trap door, which closed above their heads. At the foot of the ladder, brightly lit by a lamp, was a very small saloon, where Raymond was waiting for them and where the 3 had just room to sit down. Lupin took the mouthpiece of a speaking tube from a hook and gave the order, "Let her go, Charolais." Isidore had the unpleasant sensation which one feels when going down in a lift, the sensation of the ground vanishing beneath you, the impression of emptiness, space. This time, it was the water retreating, and space opened out, slowly. "We're sinking, eh?" grinned Lupin. "Don't be afraid. We've only to pass from the upper cave where we were to another little cave, situated right at the bottom and half open to the sea, which can be entered at low tide. All the shellfish catchers know it. 10 seconds wait. We're going through the passage, and it's very narrow, just the size of the submarine." "But," asked Beautrelet, "how is it that the fishermen who enter the lower cave don't know that it's open at the top, and that it communicates with another from which a staircase starts and runs through the Needle? The facts are at the disposal of the first comer." "Wrong, Beautrelet. The top of the little public cave is closed, at low tide, by a movable platform painted the color of the rock, which the sea, when it rises, shifts and carries up with it, and, when it goes down, fastens firmly over the little cave. That is why I am able to pass at high tide. A clever notion, what? It's an idea of my own. True, neither Caesar nor Louis XIV, nor, in short, any of my distinguished predecessors could have had it, because they did not possess submarines. They were satisfied with the staircase, which then ran all the way down to the little bottom cave. I did away with the last treads of the staircase and invented the trick of the movable ceiling. It's a present I'm making to France. Raymond, my love, put out the lamp beside you. We shan't want it now. On the contrary. A pale light, which seemed to be of the same color as the water, met them as they left the cave and made its way into the cabin through the two portholes and through a thick glass skylight that projected above the planking of the deck and allowed the passengers to inspect the upper layers of the sea. And, suddenly, a shadow glided over their heads. "The attack is about to take place. The fleet is investing the Needle." "But hollow as the Needle is, I don't see how they propose to enter it." He took up the speaking tube. "Don't leave the bottom, Charolais." "Where are we going?" "Why, I told you. To Port Lupin." "And at full speed, do you hear? We want water to land by—" "There's a lady with us." They skimmed over the rocky bed. The seaweed stood up on end like a heavy, dark vegetation, and the deep currents made it wave gracefully, stretching and billowing like floating hair. Another shadow, a longer one. "That's the torpedo boat," said Lupin. "We shall hear the roar of the guns presently. What will Duguay-Trouin do? Bombard the Needle? Think of what we're missing, Beautrelet, by not being present at the meeting of Duguay-Trouin and Ganimard. The juncture of the land and naval forces. Hi, Charolais, don't go to sleep, my man." They were moving very fast for all that. The rocks had been succeeded by sand fields, and then, almost at once, they saw more rocks which marked the eastern extremity of Étretat, the Porte de Mont. Fish fled at their approach. One of them, bolder than the rest, fastened on to a porthole and looked at the occupants of the saloon with its great, fixed, staring eyes. "That's better," cried Lupin. "We're going now. What do you think of my cockleshell, Beautrelet? Not so bad, is she? Do you remember the story of the Seven of Hearts, the wretched end of Lacombe, the engineer, and how, after punishing his murderers, I presented the state with his papers and his plans for the construction of a new submarine? One more gift to France? Well, among the plans, I kept those of a submersible motorboat, and that is how you come to have the honor of sailing in my company." He called to Charolais. "Take us up, Charolais. There's no danger now." They shot up to the surface, and the glass skylight emerged above the water. They were a mile from the coast, out of sight, therefore, and Beautrelet was now able to realize more fully at what a headlong pace they were traveling. First Fécamp passed before them, then all the Norman seaside places, Saint-Pierre, the Petit Dal, Voulet, Saint-Valery, Vaux, Quiberville. Lupin kept on jesting, and Isidore never wearied of watching and listening to him, amazed as he was at the man's spirits, at his gaiety, his mischievous ways, his careless chaff, his delight in life. He also noticed Raymond. The young woman sat silent, nestling up against the man she loved. She had taken his hands between her own, and kept on raising her eyes to him, and Beautrelet constantly observed that her hands were twitching, and that the wistful sadness of her eyes increased. And, each time, it was like a dumb and sorrowful reply to Lupin's sallies. One would have thought that his frivolous words, his sarcastic outlook on life, caused her physical pain. "Hush!" she whispered. "It's defying destiny to laugh. So many misfortunes can reach us still." Opposite Dieppe, they had to dive lest they should be seen by the fishing craft. And 20 minutes later, they shot at an angle toward the coast, and the boat entered a little submarine harbor, formed by a regular gap between the rocks, drew up beside a jetty, and rose gently to the surface. Lupin announced, "Port Lupin!" The spot, situated at 16 miles from Dieppe and 12 from the Tréport, and protected, moreover, by the two landslips of cliff, was absolutely deserted. A fine sand carpeted the rounded slope of the tiny beach. "Jump on shore, Beautrelet. Raymond, give me your hand. You, Charolais, go back to the Needle, see what happens between Ganimard and Duguay-Trouin, and come back and tell me at the end of the day. The thing interests me tremendously." Beautrelet asked himself with a certain curiosity how they were going to get out of this hemmed-in creek, which was called Port Lupin, when, at the foot of the cliff, he saw the uprights of an iron ladder. "Isidore," said Lupin, "if you knew your geography and your history, you would know that we are at the bottom of the gorge of Parfonval, in the parish of Béville. More than a century ago, on the night of the 23rd of August, 1803, Georges Cadoudal and 6 accomplices, who had landed in France with the intention of kidnapping the first consul Bonaparte, scrambled up to the top by the road which I will show you. Since then, this road has been demolished by landslips, but Louis Valméras, better known by the name of Arsène Lupin, had it restored at his own expense and bought the farm of the Neuvillette, where the conspirators spent the first night, and where, retired from business and withdrawing from the affairs of this world, he means to lead the life of a respectable country squire with his wife and his mother by his side. The gentleman-burglar is dead. Long live the gentleman-farmer." After the latter came a sort of gully, an abrupt ravine hollowed out, apparently by the rains, at the end of which they laid hold of a makeshift staircase, furnished with a handrail. As Lupin explained, this handrail had been placed where it was in the stead of the estamperche, a long rope fastened to stakes, by which the people of the country, in the old days, used to help themselves down when going to the beach. After a painful climb of half an hour, they emerged on the tableland, not far from one of those little cabins, dug out of the soil itself, which serve as shelters for the excisemen. And, as it happened, 2 minutes later, at a turn in the path, one of these custom-house officials appeared. He drew himself up and saluted. Lupin asked, "Any news, Gomel?" "No, Governor." "You've met no one at all suspicious-looking?" "No, Governor. Only—" "What?" "My wife." "Who does dressmaking at the Neuvillette?" "Yes, I know. Césarine. My mother spoke of her." "Well?" "It seems a sailor was prowling about the village this morning." "What sort of face had he?" "Not a natural face, a sort of Englishman's face." "Ah," said Lupin, in a tone preoccupied. "And you have given Césarine orders to keep her eyes open?" "Yes, Governor." "Very well. Keep a lookout for Charolais's return in 2 or 3 hours from now. If there's anything, I shall be at the farm." He walked on and said to Beautrelet, "This makes me uneasy. Is it Shears?" "Ah! If it's he, in his present state of exasperation, I have everything to fear." He hesitated a moment. "I wonder if we hadn't better turn back. Yes, I have a nasty presentiment of evil." Gently undulating plains stretched before them as far as the eye could see. A little to the left, a series of handsome avenues of trees led to the farm of the Neuvillette, the buildings of which were now in view. It was the retreat which he had prepared, the haven of rest which he had promised Raymond. Was he, for the sake of an absurd idea, to renounce happiness at the very moment when it seemed within his reach? He took Isidore by the arm, and calling his attention to Raymond, who was walking in front of them, "Look at her. When she walks, her figure has a little swing at the waist which I cannot see without quivering. But everything in her gives me that thrill of emotion and love, her movements and her repose, her silence and the sound of her voice. I tell you, the mere fact that I am walking in the track of her footsteps makes me feel in the 7th heaven. Ah, Beautrelet, will she ever forget that I was once Lupin? Shall I ever be able to wipe out from her memory the past which she loathes and detests?" He mastered himself, and, with obstinate assurance, "She will forget," he declared. "She will forget, because I have made every sacrifice for her sake. I have sacrificed the inviolable sanctuary of the Hollow Needle. I have sacrificed my treasures, my power, my pride. I will sacrifice everything. I don't want to be anything more, but just a man in love, and an honest man, because she can only love an honest man. After all, why should I not be honest? It is no more degrading than anything else." The quip escaped him, so to speak, unawares. His voice remained serious and free of all chaff, and he muttered, with restrained violence, "Ah, Beautrelet, you see, of all the unbridled joys which I have tasted in my adventurous life, there is not one that equals the joy with which her look fills me when she is pleased with me. I feel quite weak then, and I should like to cry. Was he crying? Beautrelet had an intuition that his eyes were wet with tears. Tears in Lupin's eyes. Tears of love. They were nearing an old gate that served as an entrance to the farm. Lupin stopped for a moment and stammered, "Why am I afraid? I feel a sort of weight on my chest. Is the adventure of the Hollow Needle not over? Has destiny not accepted the issue which I selected?" Raymond turned round, looking very anxious. "Here comes Césarine. She's running." The exciseman's wife was hurrying from the farm as fast as she could. Lupin rushed up to her. "What is it? What has happened? Speak!" Choking, quite out of breath, Césarine stuttered. "A man! I saw a man this morning. A man! I saw a man in the sitting-room." "The Englishman of this morning?" "Yes, but in a different disguise." "Did he see you?" "No. He saw your mother. Madame Valmeras caught him as he was just going away." "Well?" "He told her that he was looking for Louis Valmeras, that he was a friend of yours." "Then?" "The madame said that her son had gone abroad, for years." "And he went away?" "No. He made signs through the window that overlooks the plain, as if he were calling to someone." Lupin seemed to hesitate. A loud cry tore the air. Raymond moaned, "It's your mother, I recognize." He flung himself upon her and, dragging her away, in a burst of fierce passion, "Come, let us fly, you first." But suddenly he stopped, distraught, overcome. "No, I can't do it. It's too awful." "Forgive me, Raymond. That poor woman down there. Stay here. Beautrelet, don't leave her." He darted along the slope that surrounds the farm, turned and followed it at a run, till he came to the gate that opens on the plain. Raymond, whom Beautrelet had been unable to hold back, arrived almost as soon as he did, and Beautrelet, hiding behind the trees, saw, in the lonely walk that led from the farm to the gate, 3 men, of whom one, the tallest, went ahead, while the 2 others were holding by the arms a woman who tried to resist and who uttered moans of pain. The daylight was beginning to fade. Nevertheless, Beautrelet recognized Holmlock Shears. The woman seemed of a certain age. Her livid features were set in a frame of white hair. They all 4 came up. They reached the gate. Shears opened one of the folding leaves. Then Lupin strode forward and stood in front of him. The encounter appeared all the more terrible inasmuch as it was silent, almost solemn. For long moments, the 2 enemies took each other's measure with their eyes. An equal hatred distorted the features of both of them. Neither moved. Then Lupin spoke, in a voice of terrifying calmness. "Tell your men to leave that woman alone." No. It was as though both of them feared to engage in the supreme struggle, as though both were collecting all their strength. And there were no words wasted this time, no insults, no bantering challenges. Silence, a death-like silence. Mad with anguish, Raymond awaited the issue of the duel. Beautrelet had caught her arms and was holding her motionless. After a second, Lupin repeated, "Order your men to leave that woman alone." No. Lupin said, "Listen, Shears." But he interrupted himself, realizing the silliness of the words. In the face of that colossus of pride and willpower which called itself Holmlock Shears, of what use were threats? Resolved upon the worst, suddenly he put his hand to his jacket pocket. The Englishman anticipated his movement and, leaping upon his prisoner, thrust the barrel of his revolver within 2 inches of her temple. "If you stir a limb, I fire!" At the same time, his 2 satellites drew their weapons and aimed them at Lupin. Lupin drew himself up, stifled the rage within him, and, coolly, with his hands in his pockets and his breast exposed to the enemy, began once more. "Shears, for the 3rd time, let that woman be." The Englishman sneered. "I have no right to touch her, I suppose? Come, enough of this humbug. Your name isn't Valmeras any more than it's Lupin. You stole the name just as you stole the name of Charmeras. And the woman whom you pass off as your mother is Victoire. your old accomplice, the one who brought you up. Shears made a mistake. Carried away by his longing for revenge, he glanced across at Raymond, whom these revelations filled with horror. Lupin took advantage of his imprudence. With a sudden movement he fired. "Damnation!" bellowed Shears, whose arm, pierced by a bullet, fell to his side. And addressing his men, "Shoot, you two! Shoot him down!" But already Lupin was upon them. And not 2 seconds had elapsed before the one on the right was sprawling on the ground, with his chest smashed, while the other, with his jaw broken, fell back against the gate. "Hurry up, Victoire. Tie them down. And now, Mr. Englishman, it's you and I." He ducked with an oath. "Ah, you scoundrel!" Shears had picked up his revolver with his left hand and was taking aim at him. A shot! A cry of distress. Raymond had flung herself between the two men, facing the Englishman. She staggered back, brought her hand to her neck, drew herself up, spun round on her heels and fell at Lupin's feet. "Raymond! Raymond!" He threw himself upon her, took her in his arms and pressed her to him. "Dead," he said. There was a moment of stupefaction. Shears seemed confounded by his own act. Victoire stammered, "My poor boy, my poor boy." Beautrelet went up to the young woman and stooped to examine her. Lupin repeated, "Dead, dead." He said it in a reflective tone, as though he did not yet understand, but his face became hollow, suddenly transformed, ravaged by grief. And then he was seized with a sort of madness, made senseless gestures, wrung his hands, stamped his feet, like a child that suffers more than it is able to bear. "You villain!" he cried, suddenly, in an access of hatred, and flinging Shears back with a formidable blow, he took him by the throat and dug his twitching fingers into his flesh. The Englishman gasped, without even struggling. My boy!" said Victoire in a voice of entreaty. Beautrelet ran up, but Lupin had already let go and stood sobbing beside his enemy stretched upon the ground. Oh, pitiful sight! Beautrelet never forgot its tragic horror. He who knew all Lupin's love for Raymond, and all that the great adventurer had sacrificed of his own being to bring a smile to the face of his well-beloved. Night began to cover the field of battle with a shroud of darkness. The three Englishmen lay bound and gagged in the tall grass. Distant songs broke the vast silence of the plain. It was the farm hands returning from their work. Lupin drew himself up. He listened to the monotonous voices. Then he glanced at the happy homestead of the Novillette, where he had hoped to live peacefully with Raymond. Then he looked at her, the poor loving victim whom love had killed, and who, all white, was sleeping her last eternal sleep. The men were coming nearer, however. Then Lupin bent down, took the dead woman in his powerful arms, lifted the corpse with a single effort, and bent in two, stretched it across his back. "Let us go, Victoire. Let us go, dear." "Goodbye, Beautrelet," he said. And, bearing his precious and awful burden followed by his old servant, silent and fierce he turned toward the sea and plunged into the darkness of the night.